Are y'all seeing the screen that says Planning Commission March 17th, special meeting at 4:30? Great, thank you.
Hey, Chloe, Christopher, it's Angie Johnson. I'm having trouble connecting on my laptop, so I'm joining from my phone, but I'm going to leave and connect once my laptop restarts, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Who do you want to introduce, Robert?
All right, Chloe, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Christopher, if you and Chloe are ready, we'll go ahead and get started.
All right, Mr. Chairman, and I think we're gonna just go right into the presentation for the 4:30, and then we'll do the formal introductions and everything like that at 5, if we could.
Yeah,
So
that's what I figured. We call the meeting back to order at 5, I guess, officially.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'd like to welcome everyone to this special meeting of the City of Charleston Planning Commission, March 17th, 2021. The special meeting is so that Gianna, I hope I say your name right, I always mispronounce it, Johnson, the Director of the City of Charleston Department of Housing and Community Development, can give us report on some updates and stuff on the workforce housing unit requirements and such. And John, I want to start off by thanking you for your work. I know you have a tough job and you're trying to get through it. So we appreciate your work on behalf of the city and the community. So I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Very good. Thank you, sir. I appreciate the Planning Commission and your efforts. You all seem to have much longer nights than I do sometimes. So thank you all for your time and your service to the city of Charleston and its residents. And Christopher asked me to come this evening to present to you a report that I provided to the Community Development Committee of City Council several weeks ago. We were asked to evaluate several years ago the mixed-use workforce housing zoning, specifically the fee in lieu and the creation of the workforce housing units in regard to that zoning. And we are a little bit behind in bringing forth that information. But as we prepared ourselves to do that, we thought it appropriate because of your role with workforce and affordable housing to share this information with you. And I know that Chloe prepared a little PowerPoint of the report that I'm gonna share with you this afternoon. And I'm gonna just jump right in because I know we want to make sure we stay on time for the actual meeting because you have a number of items to cover. I will start by saying back in December of 2017, we made changes to the mixed-use workforce housing zoning, whereby we added additional incentives to that. We also changed the percentage of affordable housing that developers would have to build. In addition to that, we also changed the affordability period, how long those particular units have to remain affordable. We increased the percentage of affordable housing to 20% from 15%, and we increased the term of affordability or how long they could remain affordable from 10 years to 25 years. And in fact, I don't know if I'm going to hit all of the slides that Chloe has made available to you, but they're certainly available to you for information. And hopefully you also have the written report on your desk, or you will have that available to you. We made some changes in that we increased the fees from the 310 to 5, from 340 to 510. At that time, when we were talking about a fee increase, we also added the option of providing land if the developers were unable to build units on site. So they could build units on site, that percentage that I previously mentioned, or if they were unable to do that or chose not to, they could provide comparable land within 2 miles of their development to the city of Charleston as another option to the fee in lieu. Naturally, when we started this process back in 2017, 2018, we had a number of developers come forth, some in support. Most indicated at the time that the fees that we were proposing were too high. And I think many of you, or at least some of you, were on Planning Commission at the time, and you remember that because we looked at projects from across the country. We looked at various fee scenarios. We looked at pro formas and net operating income and all of those things that developers consider when they're building affordable housing, as we decided which fees that we would contemplate. And I would just say, for the record, that even then I thought the fees that we were considering were too low. One of our council members at the time says, Gianna, let's go forward with this. And in a year's time, if no one's utilized this option, then the fee has been too high. If everyone's used the option, then the fee is too low. So I would just say to you, as you look at this report and as we talk through this today, out of the 14 developments that have chosen the mixed-use workforce housing option, 13 of those developments have decided to pay the fee. And in your report, and it's here on the screen, so there have been 14 developments, and there is a breakdown later in the report that shows you literally the name, the number of units, the associated fees that go along with that. This evidence basically said to us that the fee in lieu, or the fees that we have earned over these last several years were lower than they probably should have been. We came to that conclusion simply because of the 14 developments, 13 have utilized the fee. I would say to us as well, one of the things that I have thought about the fee in lieu process all along is that it is a double-edged sword in that we were able to secure, and we'll talk about the funding, a set amount of funding, which enabled us to help folks in a larger spectrum of affordable housing. We missed the opportunity of having that affordable housing available to us in the city of Charleston. And as we look at the need for affordable housing and how pervasive that need is, we want to encourage our developers to build on site. And in fact, later on in your meeting, you will talk about, or at least Corporation Council will talk through the new workforce housing ordinance that we are recommending to the Planning Commission, which encourages the development of affordable housing and gives the developers an option to build and pay a fee, if you will, on site, because we recognize that we need the housing. We also recognize that the funding is important, but again, our private sector developers can often do this faster, more expediently than we can, because literally once the city is having to do that, we have to turn around and do an RFP or an RFQ, which takes additional time. So we really want to encourage our private sector developers to build affordable housing on site where they can. And so you'll hear more about that later. Let me share some more information with you quickly. As of January of this year, we received about $11.13 million in fee in lieu income. Part of that was funding revolving back to the account. And we use this account to create and preserve affordable housing. Although I would just say to you that the primary dollars have been used for the creation of everything from purchasing land. And again, that information is in the very back of this report, to helping to build or construct new units in the West Ashley community. Our low-line affordable housing site that you will hear more about as time goes on. This funding has enabled us to facilitate all of that, such that we have a little over 200 units that we have been able to garner, utilizing a little over $7 million of this funding. One of the things that we did not do, which will also be recommended in the new ordinance, is we didn't put an escalator in on the fee in lieu income. We did not add an escalator relative to the consumer price index or the area median income, which means although we received funding, we did not receive an increase in funding, as we noted that construction prices in the house of housing continue to rise in our community. Now that we're smarter, we're going to make sure that we include that in the information to come. So as I indicated, we have expended to date, and that may have changed since we prepared this report, but simply around $7 million to create about 237 units. And you all can do the math. It's awesome to get that number of units, but it would be awesome to leverage that such that we have a higher number of units. And so that's what we want to make sure that we cover, simply because as we look at the development of units, on average, $250,000 per unit, and that's in a multifamily development. It becomes very costly to build in the city of Charleston and really in our region. And so again, more of a reason, if you will, to encourage fee in lieu, to encourage the building of units on site versus the paying of the fee in lieu. As you all know, and as I may have indicated, the value of the fee in lieu, especially without an escalator, lessens as time passes, especially in our current real estate market, where the construction of housing, and you may have even heard more recently, the cost of lumber itself has gone up 30%. So literally developments now are seeing even a higher escalation of costs relative to affordable housing. And we are finding that our need for subsidy is higher. And so we have to become more strategic about how we expend money and how we garner funding for the development of affordable housing. In the report, it talks about rental developments versus for sale. Under the MU2 structure, developers can choose to either rent apartments to individuals at the 80% level or sell to individuals at the 120% level. In most, in all of the developments that have chosen this option, it's been a rental option versus a for sale option. We're still providing that for sale affordable housing, just simply not in the structure that you see here. So having said what I've indicated to you tonight, our goal is to share with you the fact that we are recommending to Planning Commission, as a result of the evidence that we've seen here, that we need to encourage developers to build on site. And so what you will see later is a combination of fees that become more punitive if you choose not to build on site. Because again, the thought is that we would get a mix of housing in our community, and where we did not achieve that, we want to be able to do that as we move forward in this. As I conclude and open this to questions for you all, I would say fee in lieu has not been all bad. Let me just say that, because in my tenure and my time with the city, the primary source of funding that we've had available to us has been federal dollars. We have some general fund dollars, but the primary funding that we have utilized to facilitate housing has been your community development block grant, your home investment partnership program funding, other sources from which we have secured from the federal government. Now, we have leveraged that money naturally with private sector money from our local banks, but I would just say that money had carried our housing program for many years. So having this source of funds that is not restricted to federal guidelines, if you will, has enabled us to facilitate more housing and done it more quickly. But we would like to see a greater amount of that housing in our community. In fact, you all have been engaged and heard the numbers from your comprehensive plan, especially those numbers related to the need for affordable housing. And it is pretty astronomical, if I could use the term, because when I look at those numbers and I look at the need, it is amazing to me. And you have to consider, how are we going to meet that need? Part of meeting that need is hoping that we can collaborate more closely with our private sector development partners, as well as our nonprofit partners, to build the housing that is needed. So in light of the need for affordable housing and funding to ensure its continued production, we have asked Mayor and City Council to look at that fee increase. We have asked local developers to contemplate and consider building those units on site. And so we're hoping, as a result of the change in the mixed-use workforce housing ordinance and those things that will come before you this later on this afternoon, we will see a change, if you will, in the numbers of affordable housing in our urban core in particular. I will also add, before I talk about these expenditures, is we would honestly love to see this option of mixed-use workforce housing in other areas of the city of Charleston. primarily it has been in what we refer to as our urban core. And I've mentioned this to Christopher and also shared it with Jacob prior to his departure. Another subject for another time, but I just wanted to throw that out there and put it in your ears because I think it will be important long-term. So Chloe, if you will go back to that, just so I can cover with the commission very quickly where we've invested that money. We purchased the Fenwick property that was approximately $3 million. We built 7 units of housing, single family detached housing in the Ashleyville, Maryville community. We paid for our low-lying parcel. We will build 55 units of affordable rental housing near the future Low Country Low Line. We also invested in Grace Homes, which is the development that our local housing authority has constructed. It is now vertical and they are now leasing. So we're very excited about that. We built 4 single family detached homes on the peninsula known as the Katrina Cottages. So we've been busy. We acquired some other land, another info lot at 36 Cooper Street, and did some other work near Ashley River Road. All of that, again, was facilitated by the funding that we secured from our fee in lieu dollars. So there, I did a very quick summary for you of the report. You have it in your hands, and if not, we can certainly get that to you. I will entertain any questions that you might have. And certainly if you have others later on that you don't think of right now, I think everybody knows how to reach me. And I'm glad to entertain those questions and answer any questions that you might have right now in the few minutes we have remaining.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson, and I appreciate the report. I think you're right on with the thought about the fee in lieu tied into people opting out. And we talked about at the last meeting a lot about diversity, what diversity means, and affordable housing, how they're tied in together.
Yes,
so
sir.
I appreciate your work.
Thank
Commission members, I'll ask you, have any questions or comments?
I have a question.
Mr. Bailey, you go ahead.
Ms. Johnson, I think I saw this in one of the slides, and maybe you even said it, but I was trying to read all those numbers on the screen and keep up with you. What
I talk faster than most Southerners too, so.
Well, I can still understand you. So, in any event, was there did you have a number that showed what the number of units would have been had the fee not been paid compared to what you've been able to generate from the fees?
So we have in the very rear of the presentation that or report that I provided to you, the total number of build out, because the developers were building a percentage of build out. So if they were building 200 units, 15% of that, or now 20% of that is what they were required to build for affordable housing. So the fee that they paid was based on that 20% affordable housing. So for instance, if you were looking at your 99 West Edge, they had to do, their total units were 237 units. The workforce units were 36 of that number. And so yes, in the very back of your report, it shows that. And then it shows the corresponding fee as well.
Okay. I don't have the fee, and I mean, I don't have the sheet in front of me. I don't have the benefit of a dual screen here at
That's
home.
okay. So for instance, the total fee would have been, and we don't have that comparison on that chart, because I think what you asked is, do we have it if it were without the fee? I mean, you could do some quick math, but we won't try that this afternoon.
Yeah, that was my question is
right.
Had the developers all chosen to build the units as opposed to paying the fee, how much better off would we be?
Well, I would just say this, we would have found a way to leverage to get work done like we've always managed to do in the city of Charleston. we would have had some phenomenal numbers in the workforce units. Probably based on this chart, it looks like over 381, and I hope I'm reading this right. I have a staff member somewhere on this call that can help me with this chart, but the goal would have been 20%, or in this case, 15%, because I would say of the developments that we have looked at, most of them fell under the original fee and lieu process or percentage of affordable housing, meaning they were entitled prior to the change that was voted on in December of 2017 and that took effect in January 2018. So most of them paid a lesser fee at the 340, and they were only required to do 15%. But it looks like here, the total offset of units is about 285 to 381. I'd have to do the math, but that gives you an indication, if you will.
And Christopher or Chloe, if you go back one or two slides,
Oh, Matt, you are on the call.
there's a breakdown, and so it's the developers have opted out of building 381
81,
units on the
okay.
13 developments, and what they would have with the fee, you can see below, it's a little, we're facilitating, already 237 units, but that doesn't factor in all the development costs on a site. So it's a representation of what the city's been able to do with the funding it's received thus far. But if you're looking at it, what it costs to develop a unit, you can see that around $250,000 a unit, you're really developing a much lesser number of affordable homes in the community.
This is the data I was looking for. Thank you.
You are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Other questions or comments from commission members? Ms.
Mr.
Jacobs,
Chairman,
you go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Johnson, since we're going to be considering this new ordinance, I might just ask a little perspective why we stayed with the 25 years and didn't try to increase the time frame, one. And two is this tier system. I was trying to kind of look at it and do the math in my head and make some understanding of it. And it seems a little like I need one of these super tech calculators on this. I wanted to make sure that y'all were comfortable with that one, but do y'all have any illustrations anywhere of how those calculations work so the average person could really understand those tiers and the calculations and how they work? Has staff done an example, if you will, before it goes? I know we wouldn't have that tonight for consideration, but I'm just wondering if that is some place where you can look at an
Absolutely.
illustration of that.
Absolutely. We have several charts that makes it easier to understand the math, and they're in quarter percentiles, for lack of a better term. But we have that data, if you will, in that chart that can very well illustrate that formula and what that would literally mean to the layperson so that everyone could understand it. So we'll make sure you have that. And quite honestly, when we were thinking about the period of affordability, you bring up an excellent point. I think our focus was so stringently placed on the percentage of affordable housing that we weren't necessarily thinking about the period of affordability being 25 years. I know in the UP zoning, it is 30. In many of the programs that we manage, it is either 30 or 90. So certainly if that is something that the Planning Commission wants us to consider, certainly with planning staff's input, we will look at that as well. And again, I think that would be commensurate with some of the other periods of affordability we have available in the city of Charleston.
Because I think I saw a reference somewhere, and I don't know that I could find it immediately, that if the fee in lieu is paid to the city and the housing is built by the city, the affordability is in perpetuity. Is that
Absolutely.
correct? Okay.
Yes.
But when we're requesting the developers who can do it more units cheaper, we don't seem to be increasing the years, and especially even for sale units, 25 years is barely a mortgage. So I was just, you only get like maybe one generation in that affordability. So thank you for that perspective. And
You are so welcome.
And I would like to see that calculation illustration at some point in time.
Sure.
Just for
We're
my
glad to
knowledge.
get that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Other commission members, questions, comments? if there's no other questions or comments, we're going to thank Ms. Johnson for her work, and we continue to look forward to hearing from you about the process and any advice you have for us as items come along that help you in your work.
Thank you, Mr. Karish. Again, I appreciate you all as well. And we will get you the information you need and continue to press forward to make changes in our community. Thank you again.
Thank you. We're going to take just a 30-second pause, and then we're going to reintroduce the meeting, the regular meeting. So we'll probably take 30 seconds, and I'll come right back on and start the meeting. Chloe, is there any commission members that we know that won't be attending?
Not that I know of.
Okay, because I just didn't see Ms. Lampasas or Ms. Harrison on, but they'll probably be joining us as we go on. So this is I'd like to start the City of Charleston Planning Commission meeting for March 17th, 2021. My name is Charlie Karish. I'm the chairman of the Planning Commission. I'd like to point out that the Planning Commission members are volunteers and they're appointed by Charleston City Council. And we appreciate I know you join me in appreciating their work and their time on behalf of the city. The way the process will work is I will introduce the item on the agenda into the minutes, and then we will ask the staff to give a presentation. At that time, we'll then hear from the applicant. After that, we'll hear from anyone in favor of the application, anyone that has concerns or opposed to the application. Then we'll give the applicant a chance to address any issues that were brought up by the people opposed or anything they'd like to finish up with. I'd like to ask Christopher if there's any changes to the agenda, any deferrals, anything we need to know about, and also I'd ask you to introduce your staff, introduce yourself and your staff, anybody to be presenting tonight.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, everybody, and just had a fantastic bit of information there from Ms. Johnson, and greatly appreciate all her and her department's work on that. This evening, I am going to be presenting cases, as the chairman mentioned. We will also have cases presented by Ms. Harp. We will also have Ms. Stuber helping us run the meeting, and Ms. Grant will be our clerk. Philip Overcash will also be helping with a number of different things. However, I would like to take a couple of minutes here and introduce our new overall department director, the Department of Planning, Preservation, and Sustainability, Robert Summerfield, who has been with us now for about 8 days. And we are getting to know each other and enjoying having him on site. And Robert, if you want to introduce yourself to the commission, I think you're able to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you, Christopher. So good evening, everyone. My name is Robert Summerfield, as Christopher mentioned. I'm really interested in what you guys do, so I'm going to be kind of lurking in the meeting this evening just to hear how things go. The boards and commissions here in Charleston are different than what I'm used to back in Nevada, where I previously was director of planning for the city of Las Vegas. So I'm here. Obviously, Christopher and his team do a wonderful job, and Lee as well. But if you ever need anything from the Planning, Preservation, and Sustainability Department, and you need to, please feel free to reach out to me. I look forward to assisting the Planning Commission in achieving, your state and city directed mission. So thank you.
Thank you, Robert, and we look forward to working with you as well. I'm going to talk to you about Las Vegas. I've got some friends attorneys out there that you may know. But anyway, Christopher, anything else or anyone else, any deferrals, anything we need to know about with the meeting?
No, sir. I think we are ready to get going if you all are.
Okay, great. With the commission's members' permission, I'm going to take the approval of minutes last. It's just easier for me that way. So we'll go right into rezonings. Number one is properties on St. Philip's Street. Line Street, King Street, and Ackerman Court, Cannonboro, Elliottboro Peninsula, TMS number 4600, 802, 111, 114, 118, 121, and a portion of TMS 4600, 802, 015, 109, 110, 112, 117, and 122. It's approximately 0.83 acres, request rezoning of subject property from GB, general business, to mixed-use workforce housing, MU1, WH. Mr. Morgan.
And Mr. Chairman, we also want to, I think, take case number 2 at the same time, since they relate
Okay,
to.
let me go ahead and read that in as well. So number 2 is properties on St. Philip's Street, King Street, Ackerman Court. Are they different? Yeah, so TMS number 4600802011 through 013, 113, and a portion of TMS 4600802010, 015, 109, 110, 112, and 117. Approximately 1.9 acres, request rezoning of the subject properties from GB to mixed-use workforce housing, MU2, WH. Mr. Morgan.
Okay. So you all are.
Mr. Chairman, I am going to recuse myself on these 2, and I trust someone from the staff will contact me and let me know when I can get back on the meeting.
We will, Mr. Bailey, and thank you. Mr. Morgan, you go ahead.
These were items that you all had deferred last month. Of course, you looked at the height changes in the same area and recommended approval of those height changes, and they're going on to City Council. And this was one that you had recommended, you would ask for a deferral on. And of course, you were entitled to that deferral at that point in time in the process. And we are going to give you a background on this just real quickly again. I think everybody knows that King Street is on the east side of this development. The Evening Post and Post and Courier building is over here to the corner, at the corner of King and Columbus Street. Line Street is to the north. The Cannonboro, Elliottboro neighborhood, of which this is a part, is primarily to the west. St. Philip Street is to the west. And to the south is other property owned by the Post and Courier that's not subject to these changes. And then other developments along King Street to the south. And the request, of course, is to go from GB to MU workforce housing this thing's not moving around like I want it to be, in the bulk of the site, but also to MU1 workforce housing on the frontages along the St. Philip Street, so that's a little bit more neighborhood friendly, because just as a reminder, the MU1 relates to limited business, which has hours of operation roughly from 7 to 11, whereas the MU2 relates to 24-hour potential operation of businesses. And those would be the parcels that have the frontage on King Street. And just a few other background info items. In the Century 5 plan, this is in our urban core area. This is, of course, the area that calls for the most intensive types of zoning and developments, the greatest level of height. These are the areas that have the greatest coverage of services, connection to transit, transportation issues, and central to all parts of the city. This is an aerial that looks down on the subject properties. We have existing parking lots for the Post and Courier, vacant areas. I don't know if you all can you all see my cursor? See my cursor moving around? Okay, great. There were some former buildings that had been removed from the site, and then some vegetation that's here at the corner of Line Street and St. Philip. And then not part of the request are some of these buildings that are here along a portion of Line Street. So that is an aerial. Let's see, we're going to have to go here. Here is a oblique image of the property. Again, King Street towards the top, the Post and Courier's offices and their printing plant, and then the parking areas, and then St. Philip in the foreground here. Here is a view looking down King Street from street level and looking down King Street to the south, southeast. And then looking at the corner from the northwest, Line and St. Philip, and then looking from St. Philip to the southwest. And the residential corner of Ackerman's Court and residential on Line Street at present. And Line Street, street view of King Street to the south. and street view of Line Street to the west, and St. Philip and Ackermans. I think you're getting the idea of how it relates to the neighborhood, and you all probably know this site pretty well as well. So, okay, so I should point out that at the last meeting, we did not have a staff recommendation. There were still a lot of discussions going on between our administration and the applicants from a standpoint of workforce housing, because the city has strong interest in seeing workforce housing on site. And I'm happy to report tonight that there has been a gentleman's or a handshake agreement, I guess is a better way to say it, reached between the city administration on some of these affordable housing issues that will create an unprecedented level of affordable housing for this site and funding for affordable housing, as well as funding as housing on the, as well as housing on the site, excuse me. So we're very happy about that. Of course, the rezoning goes with the land. It is the MU workforce housing, MU2 and MU1 categories. So all criteria of that would be subject here. And it does fit in with all our plans. And it is in the area that would be appropriate for these types of zonings. So we are in favor of the request and recommend its approval.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. And do we have, and I don't want to mispronounce his last name, Ben Libertraw with us, Chloe?
Yes. One second.
Great. Sir, you go ahead whenever you're ready.
Hi, can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, great. Good evening. Thanks. A little bit of an echo here. Sorry, give me one sec.
I think that's on our
Y'all getting
end.
an echo?
That's better.
Thank you. Well, good evening. Excited to be here again. We presented last night. Again, my name's Ben Liebertrau, speaking on behalf of Gray Star and Evening Post. Considering y'all saw most of the presentation last month, I'll try to remain brief. I realize y'all have got a lengthy agenda, but as we stated last month, Gray Star and EPI have had extensive and ongoing dialogue with the city, with our surrounding neighborhoods, our neighbors. And those conversations have been positive. They've been very good ones. We're extremely proud of the support we've received from Canterbury-Elliott Borough, proud of the support we've been able to garner from the city and their staff and our surrounding business owners. I'm hopeful you all recall a strong sentiment of commitment and respect and, trying to meet the concerns and demands of so many different groups with a site of this size and profile. Tonight, I think, is a further evolution of that, and in many ways, a deeper commitment from our side. Our approach with the neighborhoods, with constituents, I think has been quite unique. It's been healthy, transparent, open. We've been able to uniquely address their concerns regarding livability. In addition to Chris's point, we've had ongoing discussions with the city, with other groups regarding the workforce housing goals of the city. Although not required under the current ordinance, Gray Star and EPI have gone above and beyond with a proposal that far exceeds the requirements of the current ordinance, and I think directly addresses some of the concerns and desires that Ms. Gianna actually covered previously to this meeting. Next slide, please, and you just jump to number 3, actually. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the site plan. We talked about this, shorter buildings on the perimeter, larger in the interior. On the residential front, though, I did want to address short-term rentals again. I want to clarify that none of the units here are currently proposed as STRs. We've gone to great lengths with Canterbury-Elliott Borough Historic Charleston Preservation Society to ensure that doesn't happen. It's a very hot topic amongst our neighbors. We understand that. We've addressed it head on. So we've gone above and beyond to meet their requests there. In addition, you'll recall our comments from last meeting. There is retail planned along King Street, going back to kind of the neighborhood and livability concerns. There's certainly concern about late night operating hours. It's a big hot topic here on King Street as well. Going with this theme of coordination and working to address the neighborhood and other constituents' concerns, we've creatively solved that via an operating hour restriction proposed. Next, please. You can go to number 5. you don't mind, Chloe. So attached, these are the rezoning areas. Christopher did a great job walking through these. In summary and in closing, I really want to reiterate a few points here on why this proposal, we believe, is not only a good fit for the city's goals and long-term planning principles, but we think this is a win for the city and its residents. Number one, Century 5 plan. This is directly in the urban core. We think it's a good fit. The density belongs here. Terms directly from the plan saying densest, most mixed use, highest density and heights. Tallest buildings would occur here. That's not our words. Those are words straight from the Century 5 plan. Number two is broad neighborhood support. With a project of this scale, to be able to get support from some very smart, very influential and involved groups is something that we're very, very proud of. I'm not saying every single person is happy with us, but we've made, I think, some really unprecedented moves with respect to true restrictions, directly addressing livability concerns, and most particularly, that preclusion of STR and operating hours that I spoke to earlier. Number three is precedent. There's numerous MU rezonings in this district and elsewhere, none of which I think have gone to the lengths that this development team has to address livability and workforce housing goals. And number four is workforce housing commitment. This team has proposed a substantial and a voluntary exceedance of the current requirements, far more than previous applications. That's Greystar and EPI's goal to help meet some of the city's goals. We propose paying the entire fee in lieu, giving the city those desired unrestricted dollars that, Gianna needs to build permanent workforce housing elsewhere. So that alone meets the ordinance. In addition to that, and an exceedance, we're proposing additional workforce housing on site. That's something that has been requested from city housing, from preservation, from historic, from the neighborhood itself. These will be built by Greystar, maintained and operated by us. In addition, and in exceedance to that even further, we're proposing those units remain affordable permanently. We believe that's an unprecedented move. If you believe this is a 100-year life building, we hope it's more than that. That's 4x what the 25-year term currently is. So we believe we've gone above and beyond. In summary, we really believe strongly this is a great win. It's a great fit for the city, and I think demonstrates really extensive compromise and exceedance of requirements from EPI and Greystar. So with that, I will turn it back over to y'all. Thank you for the consideration.
Thank you, sir. Chloe, I believe we have one person that wants to speak. Is that correct, Mr. Hawkins?
That is correct. Mr. Hawkins, your microphone is enabled. You should be able to unmute.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, commission members, my name is Marion Hawkins. I'm president of the Canberra-Aylesbury Neighborhood Association. And as I spoke at the last meeting, we have EPI and Greystar has engaged the neighborhood and the adjacent residents from the outset. We've met with over several meetings. We raised our concerns concerning the possibility of the STR use and late night use, and they have met us, and they've gone above and beyond to meet our request and to allay our fears and concerns. So they also presented our January 4th neighborhood meeting, and after their presentation, it was unanimously approved and supported. We fully support this project. EPI and Greystar has a track record with phase 1, and even with the density that will be there, the architectural component, which is the same firm that was engaged with phase 1 as well as the development on Line Street, will be working on this project. So we are confident in a long-term benefit to the neighborhood, and we know they're committed to working with us throughout the process in order to achieve a final goal of a more enhanced and a robust part of our neighborhood. So we fully support the project, and we would ask the commission to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Chloe, I believe there's 2 written comments. Would you like to read those in the record?
Yes, and for those others that signed up, we are getting to you next. We're going to get through with those speaking specifically in favor of this request. Okay, so first is from E. Mitchell Norville. It's 677 King Street. is the owner and developer of the projects on 677 King Street office building, adjacent parking lot, and the renovation of the 5 historic structures at 86, 90, 92, and 94 Shepherd Street and 285 St. Philip Street. He very much continues to support the rezoning efforts by the Evening Post Industries for items 1 and 2 on your agenda, as I did last month when they came before this commission. He's very happy to hear that you supported their request for additional height last month and that they are making progress in their efforts to redevelop this important city block. I'm writing to reiterate my support for their development and their request for additional density. I'm very much in support of the city's affordable housing goals and in general, the regulations the city has established to support those goals. I understand how this applicant and their application have found themselves in a situation where they are seeking the city's approval for a zoning change while the city is contemplating changes to the regulations which govern this approval by the city. Very hopeful that the city and developer will find some common ground by which this project will be allowed to move forward without any significant delay. Both EPI and Greystar have been exemplary community leaders, and I am sure they would take a similar approach to resolving the issue at hand with the city. As I mentioned in my last letter, the proposed development of the EPI sites on the King Street are critical to the completion of the neighborhood and eventually our success as well. We need development to continue along King Street, to eliminate all the parking lots that discourage pedestrian traffic, to connect the neighborhoods to the north and west, and to connect the new projects on Line Street to the commercial base of King Street. I believe that EPI and Greystar are proposing a solution that works well with the city's version for this urban core and with what has been developing in this area of the city for over 10 years. This project will contribute and play a pivotal role in creating an area in the city where living, working, and playing are all truly balanced by the new development. And we received a letter from Alex Olson with Armada Hoffler. This letter is to express our support for the proposed rezoning of referenced properties to MU1 and MU2 workforce housing. This project will bring a much needed balance of residents and proper contributing retail along King Street. As a neighboring property owner and long-term property holder, Armada Hoffler is firmly invested in the proper growth of this section of King Street. Our project at 595 King Street, Hoffler Place, has been a great success and complement to this corridor. We see major benefits to filling in the underutilized land and parking lots as a proper front door to the communities to the west and north. This district can support more residents, and this much needed housing downtown will reduce traffic trips into the city. They have assembled a great team, and this will be a first-class project in Charleston. We urge you to vote in support.
Thank you, Chloe. And I think that includes anyone in favor. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So now, in opposition, I believe we have 3 people to sign up to speak in a written comment. Is that correct?
Nobody in opposition, but we do have 3 people in a written comment that just wanted to make a comment not in favor or against.
Okay. Well, we'll go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay. So first up is Brian Turner. Your microphone has been enabled.
Hi,
Go
everyone.
ahead, Mr. Turner, whenever you. Hey, how are you, sir?
Wonderful. Thank you. My name is Brian Turner. I'm the Advocacy Director with the Preservation Society. And I'm really grateful to speak to you all tonight on this project. We want to thank the applicant for reaching out to our staff really early on this rezoning request. It's clearly a highly impactful project, and it occupies an important transition site between the King Street corridor and the neighborhood, the Canondoro-LA Borough neighborhood. The key to a successful project here is to provide meaningful community benefit, and we're really encouraged by the neighborhood association's support. I think the key question remains of just how many of the units will be designated for workforce housing and for how long. Housing affordability is currently lacking in what is poised to be one of the densest residential areas in the state in this area. So it's critical that we have private sector leadership in getting more workforce housing online. We feel that only paying the fee in lieu would be a big missed opportunity in light of these opportunities in the area. And we'll be looking forward to working with the applicant as they approach that next step in the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Chloe, who's next? Ms. Drolet?
Yes. Cashin, your microphone's been enabled.
Ms. Drolet, you go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Commissioners. Cashin Drolet with Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF is grateful for the opportunity to meet with representatives from Greystar and EPI and appreciate the open dialogue that we've had with their team, the opportunity to weigh in on the project all along. HCF believes that the MU1 WH zoning district is appropriate for the western portion of the property. We support that use rezoning. We've had concerns with MU2 WH zoning, specifically where the property also lies within the late night overlay. And we want to thank Greystar and EPI for bringing forward restrictive covenants that would preclude late night operating hours. We're also additionally glad to see these restrictive covenants preclude use of any of the newly constructed residences as short-term rentals. Execution of these covenants will not ultimately occur until further down the road when EPI and Greystar formally engage in a ground lease, and we look forward to seeing that occur. Given the affordable housing crisis the city faces, we're energized that the development team intends to dedicate residential units in the new building to income qualified individuals, in addition to paying the fee in lieu. Making these workforce housing units permanent is a highly commendable exercise, and we look forward to learning more details and about the workforce housing component and the number of units that there will be, and how these workforce housing units will work into addressing the city's workforce housing crisis. And that concludes my remarks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Olay. I think we have Robert Holt next. Chloe, is that correct?
Yes. Robert Holt, your
Mr. Holt,
microphone's
you
been
go ahead.
enabled.
Mr. Holt, you go ahead whenever you're ready.
And I live at 6 Tully Alley, which is a few blocks to the south of this, off of St. Philip Street. I'm also a more adjacent neighbor. I own the property between 84 and 88 Line Street, a literal stone's throw from this project. I want to reiterate a little bit of what Marion said. We very much support this. Ben, Greystar, EPI, the whole design team had a number of meetings with our neighborhood, with separate committees of our neighborhood. They went above and beyond. I think it is what Ben said. I think it is unprecedented, and it shows you what a developer can do when a developer cares about the surrounding neighborhood. And I think these guys do. The workforce housing here, I think, is appropriate, high density. It's part of the Century 5 plan, as Ben said. We had neighborhood concerns, obviously livability issues, the traffic coming off of the pedestrian traffic coming off of King Street as the partiers come to return to their cars have been a consistent problem in our neighborhood. The proliferation of short-term rentals in a very unsupervised capacity has also been a problem in our neighborhood. And Ben and his team have addressed both of those, we think, in an entirely appropriate way and in a durable way, a way that will last beyond just this developer. And I wholeheartedly support their efforts here and what they've done with you.
Thank you, Mr. Holt. I think, Chloe, there's one written comment. Do you want to read that into the record?
Yes, this is from Cindy Wofford at 8C Elliott Street. And Cindy's comment is to increase the fee and lieu rates. That's it.
All right, thank you, ma'am. I think that concludes any comments that we've had. Would the applicant like to address anything that was said before we close the public hearing?
I'm good. We're grateful for Preservation Historic, Mr. Holt, Marion, for their support. Thank you very much. We've enjoyed working with them.
Thank you. Thank you. And that's going to conclude the public hearing aspect of these items, item 1 and 2. I would like to join in complimenting the applicant for working with everyone, it sounds like, to address all the issues that were brought up, the late night issue, the workforce housing, all of those. So we appreciate your doing that. I hope you all of the leaders in that, so we appreciate that. Commission members, comments, questions, motions? Ms. Jacobs, you go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also would like to thank the applicant for all of their major efforts to work with the neighborhood and the city to make this a really first-class development and work toward meeting these so necessary affordable housing goals. And this will become a very impactful revitalization of this site. I just would like to, if I might, of the applicant, have him repeat what he said about the gentleman's agreement, because he said it so quickly. I think I heard it correctly, but I just want to make sure I understand it before I make a motion. If I could have that consideration, please.
I believe Christopher might have said that, but would one of y'all, Christopher, you want to address that?
I believe Mr. Levitrau was talking about also building out fee in lieu and permanency, and that's what I'd like to hear him restate, if you would, for the record.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes,
Would you like to
Ms. Jacobs, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sure, yeah, happy to repeat. So our proposition was for paying the entire fee in lieu. Again, that would, alone meet the ordinance requirements. In addition to that, providing workforce housing units on site. Those would be built, maintained, and operated by Greystar. In addition to that, those units on site would remain affordable in perpetuity as opposed to the 25-year term that the current ordinance stipulates.
Thank you. That's what I thought I heard. I just wanted to make sure I heard correctly. And with all of that, Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that we approve the zoning requests for 1 and 2 as stated in the record. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. There's a motion by Ms. Jacobs to approve item number 1 and 2 on the rezoning. Questions, comments, a second to the motion?
I'll move to second that motion for approval.
Great, Ms. Harrison. Go ahead, Ms. Harrison. I'm sorry.
My office is the same, a stone's throw away. And anytime that people work with the neighborhood association, like this group has done a yeoman's job. And what more can we ask of them? And I'm very confident in how this project is going to really change the dynamics of the neighborhood, but also be impactful on how it really, enters into this neighborhood at the corner of Line and Line and King. So I'm excited about this project, and I think it's going to be a great opportunity for us and for the city. So with that, I move for a second.
Great. So there's a motion by Ms. Jacobs, a second by Ms. Harrison. Any other questions or comments?
I have Charlie,
Yes,
I have a comment. I'd like to add, just in that motion, the gentleman's agreement, even though it's verbal, that be also added in the record as being part of the approval process.
And I will accept Sunday's amendment.
Can I
Great. And
just
Ms. Harrison,
make a note of guidance to the commission on this, please? Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. We need to, vote just on the rezoning itself. There is, as I said, this kind of handshake agreement about the affordable housing that is going above and beyond what the codes require. But for your votes, it should be about just the rezoning request, just to make sure we don't venture down the road of, things that we shouldn't be doing.
So do you understand that, Ms. Lemphasis? I mean, apparently Christopher's saying, is that a legal issue that we can't include that in the motion?
Yes.
I understand.
Okay.
If that's okay with Ms. Jacobs, that's fine.
That's why I just had
So
him
the
state it
motion
for the record, and we'll keep the motion as I originally made it. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from commission members? If not, we'll go ahead and take a roll call vote. We know Mr. Bailey is abstained on these items. Ms. Bryant Jenkins?
Yes, I in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Harrison?
I in favor.
Great. Ms. Jacobs?
I in favor.
Great. Ms. Johnson?
I in favor.
Ms. Lampasas?
Aye, in favor.
Mr. Lassane?
Aye, in favor.
Great. Mr. Flug?
Aye, in favor.
Great, thank you. I'm in favor as well, so that's 8 in favor and none opposed. So that motion passes. Can someone let Mr. Bailey know we're through items number 1 and 2? Can y'all text him so he can get back into the meeting? And we'll wait just a second or two and give him an opportunity to do that.
Philip's taking care of it.
Great. For the record, and I should have done this at the beginning of the meeting, I'd like to read the commission members, just for the record, who's in attendance. Mr. Jimmy Bailey, Ms. Laquita Bryant Jenkins, Ms. Erica Harrison, Ms. Donna Jacobs, Ms. Angie Johnson, Ms. Sunday Lemphasis, Vice Chairman Harry Lassane, Mr. Sean Flug, and myself, Charles Carr. So I should have probably done that at the beginning of the meeting. If we can, we're going to go ahead and move on to item number 3, rezoning, which is 334 Folly Road, James Island, portion of TMS number 42405-00028, approximately 0.49 acres, request rezoning a portion of the subject property from limited business LB to general business GB. Mr. Morgan.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is a request, as the chairman said, to go from LB to GB. You all have already seen a recent annexation that brought in a property as GB that is part of what will be a larger redevelopment here. Of course, all these parcels are part of the Folly Road overlay. That does not change. It's just the underlying zoning that would be changing here. The surrounding zonings include general business across the street, as you can see here in the darker color. There is some limited business to the south, general business to the northwest, and then of course the McLeod Plantation property owned by Charleston County PRC is up to the northeast, and then residential zonings to the east along our Martello and further back into the neighborhood there. Just to orient, let's see. This is in our highway designation in our Century 5 plan. So the request to go to GB would be in line with that. The aerial image here, these are all buildings that will be redeveloped on this site. I believe they have already been to DRB for demolition approval on these buildings. This is to build a new gas station convenience store on the property. And again, it will go through DRB review. It will be under the Folly Road overlay requirements as well. Here is an oblique image. This is Folly Road out in front. Former gas station was on the property that is now closed. A dry cleaner that was on the property that is now closed as well. A brewery that was on the property that's now closed. So a lot of different things happening here and a real redevelopment opportunity for Folly Road. Here is a street view of the subject property. And again, a residential structure that had been used commercially. And then here are some of the remaining parcels here with the gas station when it was in operation. And adjacent property to the east, office, pharmacy facility. Across the street, we have fast food restaurants. So this is an area of Folly Road that we think this is an appropriate redevelopment with the design review board overseeing the redevelopment. We feel very confident about it and are confident it's going to meet all the Folly Road overlay requirements as well and recommend its approval.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Chloe, do we have Mr. Watkins with us to present?
Yes.
Mr. Watkins, you go ahead whenever you're ready.
Hey, y'all. Thank you for having me tonight. We just want to zone the rest of the property to be with the surrounding properties, same zoning.
Great. Thank you, sir. Chloe, I don't think there's anyone signed up to speak. I think there's one comment. Is that a written comment or is that verbal? Someone signed up to speak?
Yes, someone has signed up to speak. Let me see if I can find them. Okay. I'm not seeing their name. So
I
Joe.
think it's a Joe Mosquito.
Rusquito or Rusito, however it's pronounced. If you are in the, Charlie, can you mute so we can? If you are in the meeting under another name, if you could please use the raise your hand function. So again, Joe Rusquito or Rusito, if you are in the meeting under another name, if you could please raise your hand. Okay, I think we can move on, Charlie.
Okay, there's no one signed up to speak or any comments on this other than that gentleman who apparently can be with us. So that would close the public hearing aspect of this. Is there questions to commission members, comments or a motion, please?
I'll move for approval.
Thank you. Ms. Lemphasis moves for approval. Is there a second to the motion?
I second.
Is that Ms. Brian Jenkins?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So there's a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments? If not, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Bailey?
I in favor.
Great. Ms. Brian Jenkins?
I in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Harrison?
I in favor.
Great. Ms. Jacobs?
I in favor.
Great. Ms. Johnson?
I in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Lemphasis?
I in favor.
Great. Mr. Lassane?
Aye, in favor.
Great. Mr. Flug?
Aye, in favor.
Great. And I'm in favor as well. So that's 9 in favor and none opposed. That motion was made by Ms. Lemphasis and seconded by Ms. Bryant Jenkins. The fourth item on the agenda is, let's pull it up. I'm moving my stuff around here. Is 254 Cumming Street, Cannonboro, Elliottboro, Peninsula TMS 4600802, 062, approximately 0.03 acres, small piece. Request for zoning subject property from diverse residential to commercial transitional CT. Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To orient everybody, the property is in the northeast quadrant of the intersection of Bogard and Cumming Street. Cumming Street in this location is going one way to the north towards the Crosstown Expressway. Bogard is two-way in this location. I'll just show you some pictures of the site. It is in the urban area of the Cannonboro neighborhood. As such, typically we are supportive of uses that are commercial in nature if they are in buildings that have some prior history for that use. And we'll explain some information from the applicant about prior commercial history on this property in combination with the existing commercial property that's on the corner there as well. This is an aerial image. You can see the subject property. Here you see it. It's immediately adjacent to, again, the corner property that has a commercial business in it. This is a kind of traditional Charleston single house structure. And here it is from street view. And you can see the relationship to the commercial property to its east. And again, the relationship between the commercial property and the subject property. And adjacent property to the north, residential structure. And across the street, residential. So staff is recommending approval of this because it has met the criteria that we look for if we're going to recommend approval in the Cannonboro-Elliottboro neighborhood, and that is a prior commercial history. And the applicant can give you a little bit more info about his research on the property. It actually has been researched more than we've probably seen any rezoning in a good while over there. But we think it's substantially different from some of the residential rezoning requests where we've had structures that were purely residential histories. And we think, therefore, it makes more sense for it to be a commercial designation. Additionally, the applicant is proceeding with a combination of the lots. The northern lot will combine with the existing commercial lot to the south. So the commercial zoning will all be on one lot together for a unified business expansion there that the applicant can talk about as well. But we feel comfortable that this is in keeping with the criteria we've set forth in this neighborhood to keep up with the limited commercial operations in the neighborhood that are very neighborhood friendly, but are not letting the kind of commercial overload get out of control over there. So with that, I will kind of in my discussion, let the applicant give you a little bit more background here. And I believe he's got some slides he'd like to show as well.
Okay, Chloe, is the applicant with us? And if he is, you can put him on. Let's move on.
Yes.
I am.
Thank you.
So my wife and I currently own the property where Chubby Fish is located, which is 252 Cumming Street. We had the opportunity to buy 254 Cumming Street, which is the property we're trying to get rezoned. And our initial acquisition of it was really we were having problems with the neighbors, mostly college kids having parties over there. And it was impacting the business next door. So when the opportunity came, we acquired the property and spoke with the James, the tenant at Chubby Fish, to see if he would be interested, because he had spoke previously about expanding, but we knew COVID was going on and he was closed. And so we talked with him about it and he was very much interested. He was actually looking at places where he could expand. And so that kind of got the ball rolling. We initially looked at pursuing a change of use, but then ultimately in the process of doing research, we felt that the rezoning would be better. So I don't know if you want to move ahead to, I think I have 5 little slides in there. What we really found out is originally 252 and 254 were a single parcel and actually existed as a single parcel all the way up to, I believe, 1954, where the last owner of it, which was a labor union, then sold it off. They sold off 254. They maintained control of 252 Cumming. But throughout that time, it had always been a single parcel with both structures on it. Going back, I think the parcel was originally created in 1848. And if you can skip, this is just I can explain this graphically what's on here. If you go to the next slide, please.
Oops, sorry.
So here we're just showing the original 1848 property. Lot 73, which is L on the plat, kind of a blow up on the right. That's the entire parcel, which is the same configuration as the 2 buildings. And if you go to the next slide, here you can see the progression using the Sanborn maps and the tax maps. And this research was all corroborated with actual title research that we did on the property. But you can see 1848 is a single parcel, maintains a single parcel in 1888, actually in combination with 12 Bogard Street. 1902 is when it kind of breaks off at 12 Bogard. 1944, you see between 1902 and 1944, it's showing the 2 structures. Those remain in place up until sometime between 52 and 74, where they're split, and the title research shows that happened most likely in 1954 based on the title work. So we do think that this is, it was originally this one parcel. There's definitely commercial activity that had been going on that parcel. We already have a application in to put the pieces back together, if you will. And in doing so, we'd like to have, on the left is the plat that's submitted. We're essentially abandoning the property line. The original 1848 property line would then be reestablished. And we're just looking to have the CT zoning be able to cover the entire property. If you go on to the next page. I did go through we did speak to the neighborhood. We received unanimous support from the neighborhood. to do this. I've also reached out to Councilman Gregory, Saccharin, and Mitchell. Councilman Mitchell was actually at the meeting where we received unanimous approval to see if there was any concerns from any constituents. Overwhelmingly, the biggest thing we got is everybody has been very happy, very excited with Chubby Fish. Can't wait for them to open. Very excited to see them be able to expand in the neighborhood. They've been a great asset to the neighborhood. For ourselves, we're excited about being able to restore the property back to a more original condition. There's aluminum siding on the building right now. We've already exposed some of the original cypress siding underneath that, as well as on the interior. We've found a lot of the original details of the building were just covered over. So we're excited to bring all of that back, including some beautiful wide shiplap boards on the interior instead of drywall. We did also reach out to Historic Charleston. We have a couple of other properties that are under easement with them. And just to kind of get their feel for it, I know one of the biggest concerns was the ability to use the property as a short-term rental. So we did do some talking with the neighborhood. This is after we had gotten approval and are willing to do some type of a voluntary easement restriction on the property because the intention is really to use it for chubby fish, and they intend to be there for a long time, and we want them there for a long time. And I will say, I do, if possible, if I have a little bit of time, James London, who is the proprietor of Chubby Fish, is actually on as well. And if you wouldn't mind, he'd love to be able to just give a little idea of what he's intending to do with the building.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Mr. London. We're ready for you as well.
All right, can you hear me?
Mr. London with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Go ahead.
All right. Thank you guys for having me. So today actually marks 1 year to the day that we shut down Chubby Fish. So this exact day last year, we shuttered our restaurant, and we've yet to open it back up. The reason we haven't opened it back up is that we're so small. We're 1,200 square feet. We have just over 30 seats in the restaurant, and pre-pandemic, it's a lot of fun. It's a blast to be in there. Everyone kind of waits around for their table, and it's this big communal atmosphere. During a pandemic, it makes it extremely rough for us to open it in good conscience. And so when Frank approached us about potentially having us next door, that opened up, the ability for us to reopen Chubby Fish. So we would be able to use, the driveway as outdoor seating, and would allow us to space out the interior a little bit more. In addition, we can have people wait in the downstairs of the unit next door. And so they're not, hovering over tables in the restaurant. We can, space it out. And so this gives us really, truly a way to reopen our doors, and something that we desperately need. But, I think if anyone has been to Chubby Fish, that we do a good job, and, we're part of the neighborhood. We're part of the fabric of the neighborhood. We make it a point to get to know each and every single one of our neighbors. And, as you can see with 252, I have every trust in Frank's ability to do a solid renovation. And I'm really looking forward to the potential of it.
Well, thank you both. Thank you both for your comments. We'll probably come back to you all if you want to say anything after there's additional comments. Chloe, are we going to go ahead with those in favor? I think there's people in favor wanting to speak. And then also, why don't we do Mr. Holt? He has a comment only. So anybody that wants to speak, let's go ahead and take them, and then you'll do the written comments.
Okay. Marion Hawkins, yeah, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you, Chloe.
Mr. Hawkins, you go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and fellow commission members. Marion Hawkins again with the Canberra-Algebra Neighborhood Association. Obviously, we've always had concerns about upzones from residential to commercial. We've had issues in the past where people have the one we did support in the past, it was a restaurant that was supposed a restaurant going in, ended up not going in, and the whole entire property was turned into short-term rental. So obviously we've always been very reluctant to support it. The applicant, as well as Chubby Fish, are long-term members of the neighborhood and have, are great assets to the neighborhood. So, but specifically because there is commercial precedent, there is a historical precedent at this being one property that was separated, and now it's being put back in the same thing. We see that it does warrant support, and also we appreciate the applicant in order to allay our concerns to put a self-restriction of no STR on the property. And so with that, we are full support. They did present to our neighborhood meeting, and we unanimously supported this. So again, I thank the commission for your time, and I would ask that you would approve this request.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Chloe, can we go ahead and go to Mr. Holt for a comment, and then we can just do the written comments after?
Yes. Mr. Holt, whenever you're ready.
Mr. Holt, you go ahead whenever you're ready.
Frank has been a tremendous asset in the neighborhood. Frank lives there. This is different, as Marion said, than many of the requests which we have objected to, and the requests that we have objected to are primarily characterized by folks saying that they want to have one use of a property when in fact the property is ill suited for that use. And there's no historical precedent, and they tend to be in the heart of what is residential. This property is markedly different. As you've heard, it used to be commercial. There was a corner store there historically. Frank did a terrific job renovating it. This is not about Frank getting great zoning and flipping the property. This is actually about a use. And Frank has backed that up by telling our neighborhood he would put a restrictive covenant on there, which other than the Gray Star folks that you heard, that has not been characteristic of any application that's come before you. And in fact, it isn't, because they wanted to do STR. So I wholeheartedly support what Frank is doing here. And I hope that you guys will see this is not like the other outlay our neighborhood trying to upsell. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holt. Good comments. Chloe, do you want to read the written comments into the record?
Yes, we have 6 comments in favor. The first is from William Hatler at 86 South Battery Street. I believe this request is in the best interests of the neighborhood in downtown Charleston. My support is based on the currently depressed state of what I feel can only be described as the very backbone of our city's economy, the restaurant hospitality industry, due to the effects of the pandemic. We must support all our efforts to revive our existing businesses, as well as encourage any new possibilities put forward and fit within the spirit of our city's guidelines. From Dorrit Handress at 256 St. Philip Street. I strongly support rezoning and allowing the expansion of Chubby Fish. They were a great and welcome addition to the neighborhood and have been sorely missed since closing due to COVID. Allowing them to expand and host additional people in their establishment would only add to the quality of the neighborhood. From Jason H. Rosenblum at 256 St. Philip Street. I support the rezoning of 254 Cumming Street. Chubby Fish has been a great addition to the neighborhood. It is one of the best restaurants in Charleston. We recommend it to all visitors and locals. Since COVID hit, they have done a great job to put their customers' health first. They decided not to open indoor dining to keep customers and employees safe, in turn keeping the whole neighborhood safe. We are losing many restaurants and businesses due to COVID. Give Chubby Fish a chance to continue to serve great food. Again, I support the rezoning of 254 Cumming Street. From Riley A. Sauls, 2306 Mount Pleasant Street. I'm very familiar with that corner as my family and I often dine at Chubby Fish. We are especially excited that the building next door may also be used for the restaurant as well. Chubby Fish has done wonders for the enjoyment of the area, and we are quite lucky to have some food and bev outfits are still growing and improving our spaces. I hope you consider this and vote in favor of the zoning request. From John Ondo at 208 Grove Street. I'm in favor of rezoning this property. I personally have enjoyed going to Chubby Fish and appreciate the efforts that have been made to renovate the property. I would like to see this one brought back to life and enjoyed by the community as well. Then from Angela Hall, 208 Grove Street. I fully support the rezoning of this property. The neighboring property that houses Chubby Fish Restaurant has been a great addition to the neighborhood, and I appreciate the efforts to renovate and add value and charm to a previous dilapidating property. And then to commissioners, in your public comment package, there's also a letter from the co-owners of Chubby Fish, Jim and Donna London. Jim, who you've already heard from.
I don't know if the applicant has anything to, obviously they were all in positive, so I don't know if you want to address anything else. If you don't, we'll go ahead and close the public aspect of this. Okay, we'll go ahead and close the public aspect of this, and I'd ask any commission members if they have questions, comments, or a motion.
Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Jacobs, you go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In considerations of situations like this, it's critically important to always remember that zoning goes with the land and not the owner or a successful use of a property. However, the research that this applicant has done is impressive to support his application. And we have amazing support from Canberra Elliott Borough Neighborhood Association, who is always vigilant with these sorts of applications. And the owner's intention to add this deed restriction preventing STR, I think, is also critical, because we're looking around on this map in a sea of residential property here. And so I feel that this does qualify for an exception in consideration, and I would like to move that we approve this application. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Is there other questions, comments, or a second to the motion?
I'll second that motion again.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
This is Eric.
Great, Ms. Harrison, thank you for seconding that motion. Are there comments or questions? I didn't mean to cut you off, Ms. Johnson. Did you have anything you want to say?
I was just going to second the motion, but Erica beat me to it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? If not, we'll do a roll call. I will say one thing. It shows I don't go downtown that much, or hadn't lately, or probably the past year. I'm gonna have to try Chubby Fish, that's for sure, because I hadn't been there, but it sounds like there's somewhere I'd like to go. So anyway, I'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Bailey?
Aye in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Bryant Jenkins?
Aye in favor.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Harrison?
Aye in favor.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs.
Aye in favor.
Great, Ms. Johnson?
Aye in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Lampasas?
Aye in favor.
Great. Mr. Lassane?
Aye in favor.
And Mr. Flug?
Aye in favor.
Great, and I'm in favor. That's 9 in favor, none opposed. I'm just curious, and again, maybe I'm out of touch. How many of y'all have been to Chubby Fish? I know they've been closed for a year. I'm sure Mr. Morgan's been there because he goes everywhere downtown.
I went there for Valentine's Day.
Oh, beautiful. That's
It's
great.
fantastic,
Sounds like
Charlie.
somewhere.
I'll take you there when it reopens. How about that?
Great, thank you. Thank you. I look forward to it. We'll go to the next item on the agenda, and that is number 5, 860 Morrison Drive, Peninsula, TMS 45902-00002 and 005, approximately 1.76 acres. Request for zoning of subject property included within the accommodations overlay, zoned Upper Peninsula UP. Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, here we have Morrison Drive running roughly north-south in this location. And there are some other commercial properties in the UP district on either side. To the north is a property that's actually owned by Charleston Commissioners of Public Works or Charleston Water System that is vacant at present. They have a access shaft for one of their sewer tunnels there. And then to the south is a very large office building that's under construction using the Upper Peninsula zoning. And I think the applicant can give you some information about what's going on there, because they are, it's the same applicant who's doing those developments to the south. Across the street, you have housing authority units that are part of the Cooper River Courts and the Meeting Street Manor area. And then further over towards UD Street, you have some restaurants and some other offices in areas that are under the UP zoning. So you're kind of seeing this transition in this area to the Upper Peninsula zoning, to the offices and residences that have the kind of tech orientation and workforce. You have great proximity here to the Cooper River Bridge. The on-ramps are right up here at UG and Meeting Street. And of course, Morrison Drive is a major artery into the downtown. The request is to go to the Upper Peninsula, to the accommodations overlay in addition to the Upper Peninsula zoning. We have some other images of the site. Of course, it is in our urban core, I should add, and basically all of our Upper Peninsula zoning sites are in that upper core, urban core as well. The existing accommodations boundaries, I'm going to come back to this one. Here's an aerial of the subject property. There was a tile and stone facility that sold commercial or residential tile and stone on the site that I think is no longer functioning. You can see on this image the former Port Authority property that's now being redeveloped for apartments, and then the office development that will go on this property. And there is a student housing development that has been built up here, 940 Nomo. Here you see, again, an oblique image that shows the subject property backs up to the marsh and also to a very active railroad track that supports the Columbus Street Terminal. You see UG Street and, of course, the Cooper River Bridge ramps here. There's a street view of the property when the business was functioning. And you see the Housing Authority development across the street. So our staff is concerned with this request from a standpoint of the accommodations overlay and the fact that this has not really appeared in an accommodations plan for adopting overlay expansions, things like that. We have had expansions that have occurred to the north that included some property that is adjacent to the Santee's restaurant. And across the street from that, there was another accommodations addition that related to this accommodations that was already on the ground. But in general, we've had concern about further expansion when we still have some hotels that are pending in the existing accommodations overlay. And of course, now we've had the impact to the accommodations industry that the COVID situation has had. And we think that the accommodations industry does seem like it's coming back strong now, which is great. But I think we'd like to see the accommodations industry get back on its feet and, you know, work within the confines of the existing accommodations overlay that is in the city at present before we start expanding to other areas. And so that is the reason for our recommendation of disapproval on this particular request.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Chloe, do we have Mr. Bearden or Mr. Wilson available to speak with us?
Yes, they're entering as panelists now.
Great. Gentlemen, y'all go ahead whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Okay, great. This is James Wilson. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. So I'm James Wilson with Womble Bond Dickinson, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant. With me is Zach Bearden with Origin Development Partners. And we're going to sort of do this together. I'm going to hand it over to Zach to basically go first and give you a good description and explanation of the proposed project. And then after Zach has spoken, then I'll come back and add to that. But I'll let Zach take it first here.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Zach Bearden with Origin Development Partners. This is my first Zoom Planning Commission meeting, so please bear with me. I'm actually here this evening at 860 Morrison, the proposed site, and we have a lot of the community members that and our neighbors from next door that have come out to support us. And anyway, we're having just an open forum and discussing the project. But anyway, this location and is unique, and not all accommodation requests are alike. And I think I'd just like to provide a little bit of context for our project so that it can help you guys see the vision that we have for Morrison Yard and how this piece of it completes it. Morrison Yard is approximately a $290 million investment in the city, consists of 386 market rate and affordable housing units, 40,000 square feet of retail, and 138,000 square foot Class A office. From the beginning of this process, our team has really sought to improve the community beyond our footprint. And some of the projects that we've worked on are new sidewalks for the neighborhood, crosswalks, bus shelters, new quiet zone, which is a safer rail crossing at Morrison and Johnson, a new light at Morrison and Johnson, a public bridge access to the pedestrian access on the bridge that's much safer than crossing Cooper Street. And most importantly, we're working on a new waterfront park for the east side that's a former rail spur out to the Cooper River that's already used by residents for fishing. Next slide, please. This is just a site plan. You can see to the right of the plan is the mixed-use multifamily for Morrison Yard. The office building is the site to the left of Johnson Street. And then you can see the tile and stone store that actually sits there to the left of the office. Next slide. This is a view of the new proposed multifamily and the retail, and then there's some parks there as well. Next slide. A view of our office building that shows the uniqueness for the area and the scale and how it actually integrates with the environment. Next slide, please. This is an image of the plaza for the office building, kind of opening the views back up to the neighborhood. And just in addition to the 138,000 feet of office we're building, there's 600,000 square feet of office that's recently been delivered or is under development in the Upper Peninsula. And a hotel situated in this location would significantly reduce traffic and congestion by capturing vehicular trips closer to adequate transportation infrastructure. And the ITE manual actually shows significantly more trips for residential or office use if we were to develop either of those on this remaining parcel. Currently, the closest site offering accommodations for this type of use exists just over the bridge in Mount Pleasant. And Mount Pleasant's consistently benefiting by capturing the traveler that's unwilling to pay $400 a night for an average daily rate that's more commonly associated with the core accommodation zone or the part of the historic district. There's currently not an accommodations use like this on the east side, and office tenants really need a place to stay. Some of our previous concerns for the area have all been mitigated by the city's engineering staff with sunny day flooding and some other issues. And ultimately, a hotel in this location would be required to participate in the city's affordable housing fund, which would bring more affordable housing units to the area. We already included 39 units in our project, but it would at least allow for a larger impact. And as many of the staff knows, and for some of the commissioners that were around when we came through before, you know that we like to engage the community and stakeholders with all our planning and development efforts. And we've met with the ECDC, the East Side Neighborhood Group, and our neighbors in the Housing Authority across the street. And most of our neighbors actually support our efforts and see the improvements we're making for this forgotten stretch of Morrison and for this hotel to be a net benefit to the community. And I just want to take a moment because we spent so much time and groundwork on working with the community to mention a few. Obviously, we met with planning staff to get their input. We sought out to meet with the mayor and the mayor's office, and they actually shared with us that their feeling is that the existing hotels in the core of the accommodations overlay should serve the Upper Peninsula area. We feel that we disagree with that, and that options are needed in this area so that we're not creating more trips through the East Side community and more traffic. There's other accommodations uses that are potentially planned. There's 400 units in the Laurel Island PD, but we feel our location is superior and could make an immediate impact to businesses on the East Side. We met with the ECDC. They expressed their concerns of traffic. This use mitigates those because it's less intensive. Met with the East Side Neighborhood Group. The Charleston Tech Center developers see this as a net benefit to their tenants. As mentioned, the Housing Authority residents, Historic Charleston Foundation, the Preservation Society, who we'll probably hear from. I know they're opposed to an expansion of the accommodations overlay, and you know, we coordinated and respect their position. The Coastal Conservation League actually likes the density and the plan that we provided for Morrison Yard, the master vision, but they don't comment on specific uses. And we've also met with Taco Boy, Rappahannock, the Royal American, the Cedar Room, Mercantile and Mash, Half Mile North, Home Team Barbecue, the Morris, which is another significant office development, Middle Street Partners, who's developing a new project on Romney, and Woodfield, who's working on the mixed use to the south. Ultimately, we feel that this request is just smart planning. It's consistent with the Upper Peninsula initiative that so many people work very hard on, and the comprehensive plan. And it just makes sense for the East Side and the Peninsula. And we hope that the commission also sees the value of a hotel use in this location to support the office and the retail in the area. James, I'll turn it over to you.
That's great. Thanks, Zach. So just to add to what Zach has said, we think it's very important for Planning Commission and ultimately Council to look at this site in context. And as Zach was describing, this is part of a residential, retail, office, mixed use development and that's going on right now. And as you've seen, if you've driven up and down Morrison anytime recently, you know, these projects are going up. These aren't just proposed projects. These are under construction right now. And the residential includes retail, it includes open space. It includes a significant amount of affordable housing units in that residential project that Zach was showing you. You see this open space underneath the office building. There's also behind this, on the other side of the rail track, there's an old rail spur, and there's a plan to actually acquire that and to turn that into public open space as well, to create waterfront access for residents as well as the office and this is a good slide right here because it shows the new crosswalks that Zach mentioned to create connectivity, to really make sure that this is fully connected with the rest of what's going on in the existing residential neighborhood and the Upper Peninsula generally. So that context of what's an existing and expanding mixed use area is really important in terms of thinking about how this site and an accommodations use fits in. So Mr. Morgan mentioned the comprehensive plan and that this is part of the urban core, which we all know calls for urban mixed use. And of course, that's exactly what's being proposed and what's under construction right now. The comprehensive plan doesn't speak to hotels or no hotels. So this is, it's about mixed use, and this is consistent with that. Just want to make sure nobody misunderstands and thinks that the comprehensive plan tries to exclude it. Likewise, the Upper Peninsula District, the zoning that council created, not that many years ago, well, no, it's intentionally trying to create a diversity of mixed uses here, residential and commercial. And again, that's exactly what's happening. And we think this is consistent with precisely that plan for the area. Mr. Morgan mentioned the accommodations overlay and the question of its expansion. And so I do want to address that. Chloe, would you mind? Perfect, thank you. So what you're looking at here is the original accommodations overlay from back was adopted in 86 or 87. As you look at this, what you see is that what was envisioned was an overlay that allowed hotel uses basically in the gateways of the city, meaning coming in from the Ashley River bridges as well as the Cooper River bridges, and then coming in from I-26 and then going south down the King and Meeting corridor to the market area. And that was the original concept. And of course, as we know, that's changed over time to both narrow that overlay zone, but also to add specific parcels. Chloe, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide for me, please. So this is the 1998 version of accommodations overlay. And what you see here are a few things. One is that, as the Cooper River Bridge was the old one's being replaced, that element of it is going away. It hadn't happened yet in 98, but was on its way. But what's important here also to see, you see that the accommodations overlay has been sort of chipped away, narrowed down here, but you also see parcels are being added to it, specific parcels. If you look over on the Lockwood Boulevard side, the city's added particular parcels over there near the marina and between the marina and the Ashley River Bridge. You look up very, very far north, you see where Mr. Morgan had mentioned next to the Santee's restaurant up there, that got added. And then likewise, you see a few more things. Chloe, if you would go to the next slide as well. Here you see, this is in 2013, the site over on the west side on Calhoun has been added. You see the site next to the aquarium, as well as on just south of Calhoun over near the aquarium. And then you also see what's been added where the new Cooper River Bridge, the Ravenel Bridge, lands right there, perfect, where the intersection of UG and Meeting. So the point is that this, of course, the accommodations overlay, as we know, has evolved over time. It's been narrowed, but it's also been expanded, and new sites have been added to it by council very deliberately over time. It's also continued to evolve since 2013. So most recently in the area that we're talking about, another parcel, as many of you on Planning Commission know, was added on UG Street. And then what's often referred to as that Flatiron hotel piece up north of the northern end of Morrison Drive was added as well. And then, of course, even closer to us, as you all know, Laurel Island includes a significant amount of hotel use that came through Planning Commission with their PUD recently. But the point is that this is a living, breathing thing. It evolves. It always has and will continue to do so. Just to be 100% clear about this, because I think some people get a little hung up on this. What council has done in the past and continues to do in terms of identifying, including parcels in the overlay zone, it doesn't necessarily have to be adjacent to an existing overlay property. And so that's, Often that's the case, but that's not always the case. And in fact, if that were a requirement, then many of these that you see here could never have been allowed. We think what's really important here is to make sure that the particular location that's being proposed makes sense. And I think the best way for us to think about that is, well, what are the city's goals? And we know this from what City Council has looked at recently in terms of changing the zoning ordinance in terms of the test for the criteria for an accommodations use that goes through the BZA. And those goals that they've expressed, particularly in 2016 when they did a study, where we want to avoid an excessive proliferation of hotels in any particular area, and we want to ensure diversity of uses, and we want to make sure that hotels are not crowding out residential and office uses. That's built into our zoning ordinance now. We think if you look at this site is actually in an area of existing and new residential and retail and office space, a huge amount of new office space. So when you look at this site in particular, there's no proliferation of hotels right here. And we're certainly not crowding out residential or office, just the opposite. That's being added right now. Likewise, as Zach mentioned, we don't believe we're adding any traffic congestion. That's part of the hotel concern often. We're certainly not adding traffic congestion to the lower peninsula area, which has been a big issue. Just the opposite of that, we're actually capturing trips up here. People who need to come visit to go to these offices and make use of all of the other businesses and restaurant opportunities up here. We're capturing those trips right here rather than sending those cars down further south on the peninsula. Most importantly of all of this, in terms of evaluating whether a particular site should fit in the overlay, is what the neighborhood has to say. And in this instance, as Zach's described, the neighborhood has been very supportive, and I think we're going to hear from at least some of them momentarily. But that, of course, is what Planning Commission should, of course, be listening to, as you have been this evening, is, well, what does the neighborhood think about it? What I would just say in sum is that we do believe that adding this particular site to the overlay, it's consistent with the city's decades-long approach to including particular parcels in a thoughtful manner and looking at the context and whether it's consistent with those city goals. And we think this absolutely is. So with that, I'll stop and would respectfully request that the Commission approve our request. And please feel free to ask us any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson and Mr. Bearden. Chloe, do you want to go ahead and introduce, I think there's someone to speak in favor of Mr. Jones?
Yes, Mr. Jones is actually with Zach Bearden.
Okay, Mr. Jones, if you can go ahead whenever you're ready.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Edward Jones, longtime resident of the East Side, serve on the East Side Community Development Corporation, and also run a nonprofit organization in the community. And we are here, me and some, as you can see, supporters out of the community, as here in support of this effort for this development, because for so many years, I just turned 62 years old in March the 9th. And for so many years, we was up and down public housing and looking across the street, and we seen them a big overgrown grass area, trash pile up there. So to have this development coming up near, that's going to help beautify the community, and also they're going to put a little better light shining on public housing right across the street. I didn't see why there's a problem. There's a problem with them, because that enhancing the upper part of the peninsula, starting the upper part of the peninsula, because you got to remember back in the days that this was a landfill area. So we used to play over here, but now we got a chance to see a developer that's going to develop on that land and give it all those big high trees and overgrown trees and creek being, the ditches behind it was being clogged up with trash pile up in it. And the county and the state wasn't keeping that, the waterway clean. So that's what was the backup. A lot of the backup was coming over on Morrison Drive that coming into the public housing. So, you know, me and the neighbors of the community, we decided to come across and support them with this effort of getting this side of the east side development looking pretty good. So again, I say I'm here with about 7 or 8 parents, and they're gonna be more in support of this development coming up across the street. We really need to beautify that area right by the Ravenel Bridge. And also with that being coming in, it would also help some of the employment that some of the people that live in the public house to be able to walk right across the street and work. So all this play a good part in the community. So, you know, and I'm in full support of them with this development.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. We appreciate your time tonight. Chloe, I think that's the only one signed up to speak, but I think we have some written comments in favor. Would you read those, please?
Chairman, would you like to do all all speakers first again and then go to written comments?
Well, no, I think last was a little different. So let's go ahead and take those in favor, and then we'll go into opposition. So it's a little clearer.
Okay, we have 11 written comments in favor. First, okay, hold on. Okay, first is from Aaron Pope. Please accept this email as a letter of support for the 860 Morrison rezoning request. I would like these comments entered as part of the record for the upcoming public hearing by the Planning Commission. My support is based on both my tenure as resident of the East Side since 2005 and my experience as practicing city planner. I believe the public improvements proposed as part of the site development offer a valuable opportunity for public-private partnership that will enhance my neighborhood in ways that the city has not been able to on its own. The addition of sidewalks along Morrison will provide a safer and easier path for residents along this stretch of road. A public stair tower will provide a new direct connection to Wanders Way and points beyond. The addition of covered bus shelters will meet a dire need that has been repeatedly documented as a system-wide deficit for CARTA. If the plans for land donation work out, a new pier and public access to the waterfront would provide residents of the east side something that has long been reserved for the more well-serviced areas of the city. I've lived less than half a mile away from the site for 15 of the last 16 years. I've seen tremendous change come to the east side. This includes massive new city developments built in and planned for the Cooper River Bridge redevelopment area. There has not been a corresponding improvement in the public realm. I'm excited by the MLK pool renovation and plans for a linear park to connect the low line to the bridge. I hope that the city can recognize the value and necessity of private-public improvements to complement these efforts to improve the quality of life for residents. And Aaron Pope, for the record, is the address for Aaron Pope is 109.5 Hanover Street. There's a form letter that says Origin Development Partners LLC is requesting accommodations overlay zoning at 860 Morrison Drive. The Morrison Drive corridor in Upper Peninsula is benefiting from over 600,000 square feet of office space that has been delivered or is under construction. A hospitality use, in parentheses, business hotel at this location will support the office tenants, restaurants, and retail in the immediate area with minimal traffic impacts. By signing below, I am indicating my support for the accommodations overlay zoning at 860 Morrison Drive. The following people signed this. Seven signatures, one from John Hand at the Charleston Tech Center, another Ross M. Cohen Jr. with the Morris, Kyle Anderson with Rappahannock Oyster Bar, Carolee Fowlert with Taco Boy, John Kinney at the Royal American, Steve Palmer, Mercantile and Mash, the Cedar Room, and Vishal Patel, multiple restaurants on Meeting Street. And some additional letters here that were sent. This one is from Michael Woody with Ravencliff Company. I'm writing this letter of support for the Origin Development Partners 860 Morrison Drive proposed 144 room business hotel, which is under current Planning Commission consideration. With a large amount of existing under construction and proposed office development in the area, the nearest business hotels are in Mount Pleasant, which serves of only limited value to the city of Charleston. I also appreciate the fact that transportation infrastructure in this area of the peninsula appears to be more than adequate to support additional development. We have got multifamily residential office and restaurants in the neighborhood, but have no hotels. Seems like a great opportunity. After things start returning to normal, it would be great to grab a cup of coffee with the personal note to catch up. Okay. Okay, Ryan Knapp, managing partner with Middle Street Partners. Purpose of this letter is to express support for Origin Development Partners, 860 Morrison Drive, proposed 144-room business hotel currently under consideration. Given the growing amount of office space in the area, we need more hotel units specifically to create walkable opportunities for business travelers visiting us and other Upper Peninsula-based businesses. From Mike Schwartz with Woodfield. Again, stating support for the rezoning request. With all of the momentum building on the east side with both the office and our apartment development making up Morrison Yard, this is a perfect use to build a connection to the rest of NoMo. A hotel use on this site will help to further activate the street and build a more walkable, vibrant east side. One of the many attributes that attracted us to the site that is now Morrison Yard is significant transportation infrastructure in the area, making it one of the more convenient areas on the peninsula to live. And that is it.
And that concludes the written comments in favor, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so let's go ahead into the, I think there's Mr. Turner's signed up to speak in opposition, is that correct? Is he available?
Yes.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. This is Brian Turner with the Preservation Society, Charleston. And we appreciate the applicant's efforts, first of all, to reach out to the community. That's very laudable. And that being said, as the applicant referenced, the Preservation Society agrees with the city's staff's recommendation for disapproval of the rezoning request. And I'd just like to stress two main points. First, as Mr. Morgan pointed out, this really gets back to what the accommodations overlay is intended for. And that's to manage the rampant hotel growth and provide predictability for the city's residents as to where new accommodations uses are going to be located. Piecemeal rezonings within that overlay really don't support this goal, and so we ask that you look with some skepticism on that. Second, the parcel should remain in the UP zoning district, which was specifically created for this part of the peninsula to promote sustainable growth and really heavily emphasize workforce housing. Every new accommodations development is a foregone opportunity to address the city's critical housing affordability gap. So as you consider later in the evening how the commission can support strengthening the workforce housing ordinance, approval of this request would be counterintuitive. In light of these points, we urge the Planning Commission to recommend disapproval. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. I think, Chloe, you have some two written comments. Is that correct? Do you want to read those into the record, please?
Yes, before we get to those, Councilmember Jackson is with us and she's requested to also speak on this.
Okay. Councilmember Jackson, you go ahead whenever you're ready.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. I can hear you now. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity. I am a sitting city council woman, and I know that I'm a groupie of the Planning Commission meetings. I usually try to adhere to my own principles in watching the conduction of your business by not weighing in on a particular property. And I also try very hard not to find out from the staff ahead of time what their recommendations are to your consideration. So in this case, I did not know the staff recommendation, so I'm very pleased to know that they are recommending against the inclusion of this property in the accommodations overlay. I am breaking my personal rule of speaking against 860 Morrison Drive to be included in the accommodations overlay. I feel strongly in my life and the way that I've understood a a holistic economy for any community, but more importantly, in the way that the city has experienced our sources of revenue, especially during COVID, where it basically hit us, in the face like another big tsunami wave, that accommodations are a huge part of our ongoing operating revenue that we move into the general fund for serving our citizens. And I'm very proud of the broad-based economy that is being created by the, let's just call it the digital corridor, and especially the efforts that the city has organized in public-private partnership with Ernest Andrade and his mission to bring technology to the city as a huge contributor to our economy. I don't know if Ernest has written a letter. I think he's very judicious in the way that he speaks out in public about his opinions on land use. But we know that the Upper Peninsula, especially above Morrison, in the NOMO area, has been a very popular location for the technology industry to settle in. And I appreciate that, people who come and go for business need to have places to stay. I do feel like we can accommodate that in other areas of the city. We're trying very hard to revitalize West Ashley, which is just up the road and across the bridge, where we're trying to make Route 7, Sam Rittenberg, into a corridor that welcomes people to stay. So I think we have a lot of opportunities to accommodate the hotel use that a digital corridor would need. Frankly, most of those owners and workers work digitally. That's the intent of a technology enterprise like that. So I'm very glad to understand that the staff has recommended that you all vote against this request. And I look forward to having it come to council. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Jackson. Chloe, will you now read into the record? I think there's two people that were in opposition that have written comments. You want to read those into the record?
Yes. The first is from Beatrice Bernier at 38 Nassau Street. As a resident of the East Side, I am opposing the inclusion of these properties. This property is not part of the accommodation district and should not become a part of it. It would be bad precedent, and this area and others on Peninsula will be overwhelmed by hotels. Just see Meeting Street, where great numbers of large hotels are located. They are dead with no street life and unwelcoming. Most offer poor ground floor use, uniform in function, and limited to niche gyms / workout studio or bland restaurant for hotel patron users. Such uses are so predominant that they alter the quality of life and do not address residential neighborhood needs. Most people who work there commute from somewhere else in Greater Charleston, so it is not like they're going to provide job to the neighborhood it abuts. In the aggregate, it will not add to the diversity and mix of uses, as we have too many of these particular uses already on the peninsula. On the other hand, more offices, housing, and recreational uses with access to marshes will benefit the area. And from Cindy Wofford at 8C Elliott Street, to vote against 860 Morrison as a hotel development.
Thank you, Chloe. Mr. Wilson and Mr. Bearden, would you like to address some of the concerns or have anything else to say on this as applicants?
I think we would. I'd like to start, James, and I'll let you jump in. But this is truly a mixed-use node. We've created a whole new node of activity for what was a forgotten portion of Morrison Drive, and so we've really worked hard to reknit the urban fabric. This hotel use here just makes sense from a planning standpoint to us. It does not impact the neighborhood because it's across a 4-lane road that is Morrison Drive with high vehicular counts. It captures trips on site between the uses. Just to clear something up, this site will remain in the Upper Peninsula. It can be developed for all of the things that we're doing now and that could be envisioned under UP. This is just a less intensive use as it relates to traffic. It would require, if approved, a payment into the city's affordable housing fund as that evolves. We'd love to do that. We believe in a support affordable housing. We incorporated it in our own project before it was even required in the UP. I serve on a board that supports affordable housing, so we'll make sure that's a part of our project, our development going forward. And we did coordinate with Ernest Andrade, and we did speak with his partner as well. And so I just wanted to address that. And so anyway, I'll turn that over to turn things over to James. James, if you have anything to add in response.
Yes, please. There, I mean, we heard a couple of things there, and generally this idea of too many hotels and rampant hotel growth, and but as Zach said, I think you've got to look at this in context. What's being there's not a rampant expansion of hotels on Morrison Drive. The city, Planning Commission and the city saw fit. They looked at Laurel Island. They said, hey, that's a mixed use area. Hotels should be part of that mixed use area there. Well, this also is a mixed use area. This is expanding, it's developing with new office, new retail, new residential, new affordable housing. All of that is happening. We believe that Planning Commission and Council should look at it in that same context. Absolutely. The city has spoken loud and clear. We don't want over proliferation of hotels. You don't want hotel after hotel after hotel. Look at this site. You cannot actually have hotel after hotel on this site because it's already being developed with 140,000 square feet of office immediately next door, residential immediately next to that, residential across the street, restaurants up the street. There is a whole lot happening here. And this Planning Commission, as well as Council, has seen fit to say, yeah, we should have hotels as part of the mixed use. Look at Magnolia. Magnolia has a mix of uses as well, including hotels. That is, it makes sense to have it apart. Should we have all hotels? Of course not. And that's right. We don't want over proliferation. But if you look at this mix and what makes sense here, we really believe that this is a good addition to these other uses. I could expect, I guess, respond to some other things. With regard to the Preservation Society and the piecemeal zoning, understand that that's really what I was trying to describe to you earlier. That's exactly how this has worked. We don't want everything approved for hotel use. It needs to be thoughtful. It needs to make sense in the context. Just like Laurel Island, look at this area, and some hotel use makes sense. And in fact, that is precisely what has happened in select spots in this Upper Peninsula area on UG Street, as well as up near Santee's and across the street from that. So I'd urge you to take an open mind and look at that and think of it in this context. Please let us know if you have any questions. We'd love to. Thank you.
Thank you both. That'll conclude the public aspect of this application. We'll close the public aspect and ask commission members if they have questions, comments, or any motions. Ms. Jacobs, you go ahead.
I'm sorry, did you say I can go ahead?
Ms. Johnson, you go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, it's all right. I took a few notes on this, and I actually think a small accommodations use here would be very convenient to have a business hotel here. It's not in the downtown historic area. It's close to the highway. Part of my concern, and I took some notes, is a lot of the comments against this were kind of business planning, that the hotels we already have should be able to absorb the need here. Somebody made the comment that our accommodations industry isn't back on its feet yet and we should wait and see what happens. We've never been a board that kind of looks at business planning or evaluating their business plan. And looking at it in context, it seems the perfect site for a business hotel. It seems the mixed use, the accommodations use makes a lot of sense to me. So I'm actually going to move for approval of this. I think it's a great opportunity. I think it's a less intensive use of the site. And I'm going to move for approval.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. So there's a motion for approval. Several people have their hand up. Mr. Bailey, you want to go ahead?
I think Harry and Donna were ahead of me.
Yeah,
I'll
I think Miss Jacobs is next.
Ms. Jacobs, you go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was listening to Ms. Johnson, and I have some concerns too. I mean, it seems to make sense of what they're saying, but we're so close to the city plan and where we may be developing some new thinking along these lines, where we mix accommodations use into certain zonings. I mean, as a novice planning commissioner, I was even wondering if there is a softer zoning they could go for that would, not just leap this overlay zone into this area. So that would be my first question. Is there anything other right now than an accommodations overlay that allows for accommodations use? I mean, I'm even thinking some kind of STR use to bring it down, but maybe I'm being, not understanding everything right now. If Christopher could address.
Mr. Morgan, you want to answer that question?
You're on mute.
Sorry about that. So, Ms. Jacobs, are you asking if there's a different type of use for this or a different?
No. I'm asking if accommodations zoning overlay is the only type of zoning that allows for accommodation use. Because I know the use of overlay is confusing because it's oftentimes used for a section of town.
Yeah, in the city, all our accommodations uses are in the accommodations overlay, with the exception of what was approved for Magnolia, the Magnolia PUD, and for the Laurel Island PUD. There might be one other PUD somewhere. And then of course, Daniel Island is a little bit different too. So, a individual PUD just for a hotel, probably, I mean, in certain instances, we've had those. We've had that at the old Wendy site at Spring and Cannon, but that was actually more than a hotel. That was a parking deck and some other commercial stuff. So just for a hotel, that would be kind of unusual.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Did you have anything else that you want to add?
No, thank you.
All right, Mr. Lassane, you go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually would like to second Ms. Johnson's motion. And it's very unusual that I go against the city recommendation, but I believe that the applicant's arguments make sense to me. One of the things that we just did in the previous item is that we looked at a specific site and we really sort of went against the common thinking about how we approached commercial zoning in Elliott Borough, Cannonboro, because of the specific site that was. And the commission voted unanimously to really take a different approach to what we usually do with commercial zoning in Elliott Borough, Cannonboro. And I think that's what the applicant is asking us to do in this case. They're asking us to look at a specific site and the appropriateness of extending a different use to that site. And in this case, it's an accommodations overlay. As the applicant mentioned, the zoning doesn't change. It's still Upper Peninsula zoning. It's simply adding this to the accommodations overlay, which allows an accommodations use. I don't believe we would want to extend, open up the whole STR thing again in this case. I think if there's an accommodations use to happen here, this is the way for it to happen. And I don't want to go on and on simply because I believe the applicant made good arguments as to why this is an appropriate site. But the Upper Peninsula zoning was designed to be dense. It was designed to be a mix of uses. And if you look at that accommodations overlay, in this area, there aren't a lot of accommodation uses allowed here. I think the Laurel Island PUD is a bit removed from this, and anyhow, long story short, I believe that the applicant's arguments make sense to me. They have been this particular developer has been a very responsible developer and worked very closely with the community, as we have seen, and I know this firsthand from other work that they have participated in. Mr. Bearden is a member of the board of the South Carolina Community Loan Fund, which has probably done more for affordable housing in our city and other cities than any other group in the state. So anyhow, I just I think this is I think this makes sense. So that's the end of my comments. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Lassane. So we have a motion and a second. We have some other comments. Mr. Bailey, you go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's always smart to let Harry go first because he makes most of the good comments and I don't have to repeat them. But I did want to say that I agreed with what Ms. Johnson opened with, that I don't know that it's appropriate for us to be considering whether or not it's good business or not for a hotel. I think that's up to the market to decide. There are two items on our agenda tonight that I drive past every single day. This is one of them, and the other's on Johns Island because I head out to Kiowa for work. And I have every day for the last couple of years watched what essentially, well, Mr. Jones described it earlier in his citizens' comments. That so much of this area was just scrubby field and very unattractive area of town, and I've thought, wow, this is almost a blank canvas as the city redevelops up Morrison Drive, or develops up Morrison Drive, and it's an opportunity to make good, sound planning decisions. And I think, as Mr. Lassane said, the applicant makes a very strong argument. And it's shocking to hear that coming out of my mouth, because I have probably contributed to the narrative that hotels are a 4-letter word in the city of Charleston. And I think they are in some locations, but in this particular spot, I think it makes sense. And so I'm going to support the motion as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Ms. Harrison, you go ahead.
Thank you. I'm going to be in support of this motion, but I think one thing that kind of speaks volumes is the fact that you had Mr. Jones speak. And if anybody knows him, they know that he is very ground oriented and fundamentally is a part of his community. And so when you have someone of that nature say, this is something I want, I think we have to kind of take a look back. We have to take that moment to step back and say, what is it, the comprehensive plan, or are we talking about what an entire community needs? And, we've been talking about our comprehensive plan, but we've been also talking about how do we, make these decisions kind of in this in a realm, in a new realm, in a new paradigm, in a new way of thinking about diversity and equity. And at first I was thinking, my idea of this is that this is only going to kind of be this domino effect, but in the sense that Mr. Jones has said, this is something that he wants for his community, and people, actually physically come into to speak on this because of access. That tells me a lot about why this is particularly important to them as a community. And so that's why I think I have to support this particular application. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison. Ms. Limpsis?
I am going to support Ms. Johnson's motion and Mr. Lassane's. He beat me to the second, and also what Mr. Bailey said. I think that this is a perfect spot for a small hotel, and I also believe that having the East Side neighborhood come forward and support it makes me even more obligated to support this. I hate going against the city staff. I know that they look very hard at all of these applications. But to me, an accommodation zone should not just be all in one area. And I think that the business people with the digital corridor and all the other businesses there need a place nearby. They don't want to go to West Ashley. They don't want to go to Mount Pleasant. They need a walking access to the area. So I'm going to support this application.
Thank you, Ms. Lampasas. Does any other commission members want to speak on this? If not, we have a motion by Ms. Johnson and a second by Mr. Hussain. I'm just going to say, I agree with what's been said. I understand the concerns of staff, but in fact, there is no hotel in that area. And, you know, I have a tough time if it was really a zoning issue that we were saying it shouldn't be there, but I don't think that's what we're saying. I think a lot of the argument was there's too many hotel rooms. And I may agree with that, but the fact that these people have a right to do that, I think was what our obligation is. If they have a right to do it and it's not going to affect the zoning, I think then I'm supportive of the motion as well. So there's a motion and a second on the floor. We'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Bailey?
I in favor.
Great. Ms. Bryant Jenkins?
I in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Harrison?
I in favor.
Ms. Jacobs?
I want to thank the commissioners for a good discussion and have convinced me to vote aye in favor.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Ms. Johnson?
I in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Lampasas?
I in favor.
Thanks. Mr. Hussain?
Aye, in favor.
Great. Mr. Flue?
I in favor.
Great. And I'm in favor as well. And it's unusual. We have a unanimous vote on that as well. It's 9 in favor and none opposed to that. So thank you. And I think it's going to be an interesting development going on there. And it looks like it's going to be a wonderful development. The next item on the agenda is number 6 under rezonings, 30 and 30.5 F Street, West Side Peninsula, TMS number 4631603049 and 050, approximately 0.16 acres. Request rezoning of subject property from diverse residential DR1 to diverse residential DR2F. Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And you all have seen a similar application here, and actually over the last few years, several in this neighborhood, because the neighborhood is kind of split between the DR2F that is mostly on the western side of F Street and the DR1 that has predominated up against the I-26 and also the future low lot. This is a similar request to what we'd seen. I believe it was in this location here. I'm sorry, in this location here, excuse me. The zoning that is being requested, the DR2F, would be identical to the adjacent property to the south, as well as the properties to the west. Just looking at the surrounding area, this is in our urban area of our city plan. So either one of these districts are appropriate there. This is an aerial view. There is an existing structure on each of these properties here, and they do back up to that future low line area as well as elevated highway from I-26. Here is the oblique image that shows those existing houses and the other developable area on the property. And here's a street view of the property. And street view of subject property to the southeast that is being redeveloped. And to the northwest, the distance, the character, and residential across the street. So a real mix of residential types and age of buildings in this area. We are comfortable with this request and are recommending approval.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Chloe, is Mr. Prince, Kyle Long Prince available?
Yes.
Sir, you go ahead whenever you're ready. Chloe, is he coming on?
Yes, he has access to his video and microphone.
I'm
File long if you
sorry.
could- That's okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, you go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate the talk. I did the rezoning a few years back on 28 right next door. So this is a next door property from that DR2F. Like Christopher had said, the properties across the street were already DR2F. What I kind of wanted to do was, well, first of all, I wanted to join it. I wanted there to be some cohesion with the property that I had next door as well. But with the low line park there, it was going to be a possibility of maybe having a structure toward the low line park was attractive to add something back there. The only issue that I went to the West Side neighborhood, had a meeting with them back when we did 28, and they were just concerned about parking, and there was plenty of space there for off-street parking. And that will continue to be fine. So yeah, I appreciate the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Chloe, I see there's no one to sign up to speak, or no written comments, no one in favor or opposed to this. So we'll close the public aspect of this out and ask commission members if they have any questions, comments, or a motion. Pretty quiet out there.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move for approval, but I'd also like to add a little comment. If no one drove down that area on H Street, there's the most adorable little house on a trailer wheel back there. You should go see it. Go eat at Leon's and then drive down H Street and see the tiny house that's been put back there. It's adorable and probably going to be conducive of what gets done in that area. But I move for approval for this property.
Okay, thank you. You had to mention Leon's name. Now I'm getting hungry now. But anyway, so Mr. Jacobs moves for approval. Is there a second? Other comments?
I'll second Ms. Jacobs's motion.
Thank you, Ms. Lampsis. Any other questions, comments? If not, we'll do a roll call vote.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to note that Ms. Shaw Johnson mentioned earlier about an affordable housing project that the city's building adjacent to the low line, which is right down the street. And so there's a lot of great things happening on this street and in this part of the city that's, for many years needed investment. So this is a great development. So thank you, Mr. Long.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lassane. And thank you, Mr. Lassane. It's interesting, these small pieces of property make a big difference in the area. So that's important. So we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Bailey?
Aye in favor.
Great, thank you. Ms. Bryant Jenkins?
I in favor.
Thank you, Ms. Harrison.
I in favor.
Great, Ms. Jacobs.
I in favor.
Great, Ms. Johnson.
I in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Lampsis.
I in favor.
Great, Mr. Lassane.
Aye in favor.
Great, Mr. Flew.
Sorry, I in favor.
Thank you, and I'm in favor as well. So that motion was made by Ms. Jacobs and by Ms. Lampsis, and that's 9 in favor and none opposed. We'll now go into ordinance amendments. And the first one is number 1, to amend Article 2 Land Use Regulations of Chapter 54 of the Code of the City of Charleston zoning ordinance by adding thereto a new part 19 Conservation Development, and by adding relevant definitions to Section 54-120 of the zoning ordinance. Is Ms. Harf going to do that, Mr. Morgan, or who's going to speak on this?
I'm going to give the background on this, and then we'll have some other folks help you with questions.
Okay.
Okay. So at long last, this ordinance is coming before you all. You might remember the discussion about the cluster ordinance a few months ago, where you were asking for an ordinance of this type to be there ready to go in its place. And so now we do have it ready to go. We did work on this a good bit over the past year. working extensively with our stormwater folks, making sure that this ordinance was as friendly to the new stormwater standards and helped them come up with, it helped those standards apply to developments that would be very innovative in the way that they would deal with their stormwater under those new regulations. Part of the reasoning behind this, and I'm going to go kind of fast through these because I know the hour's getting late and you all have discussed this a good bit, but we will show some of these slides here. You might remember our discussion about the different types of development that typically what our zoning ordinance allows for, requires, is this more conventional. Lots are all the same size. They're laid out on patterns, typically like grids, cul-de-sacs, things like that. And given the land that remains in the city inside the urban growth boundary, and we're learning this even more as we go through our land planning for the comprehensive plan and our water study for the comprehensive plan, that the remaining land that's in the city is really going to have variations in what is higher and what is lower and what is forested and better for development, what is forested versus what is better for development. And so it's going to point to an ordinance like this being even more important in the future. And so we're excited to bring this ordinance forward and hope that there'll be a large segment of the development community that utilizes it. We think we've written an ordinance because it's part of the basic existing zoning districts, that it can be utilized without having to go through complicated rezoning or PUD creation, that kind of thing, that it's something that the development industry will take advantage of, and we'll see a lot of developments come under this. But some of the key things that develop an ordinance like this is the creative and flexible site design, looking at all the site design aspects in advance when they're first looking at how the site could be developed. You know, where are the forests, where are the views, where are the wetlands, where are the higher areas of the site that are better to build on, where are the lower areas that should be staying away from. So it's all so important and becoming more important each day as we deal with our storms and our sea level rise and just the things that have gone on in the city over the last decades. So just kind of progressing through some of these, it would apply to the SR1, the SR7, the RR1, or the conservation ordinance. A good percentage of our city, I wish I had that figure in my head, but a good percentage of our city, and I would hazard a guess 30–40% at least, is zoned this way. So there are a lot of sites that could apply for this. However, you do have to have at least 10 contiguous gross acres. It could be through combining several sites together, or it could be on one site. Of course, the same net density as the base zoning. So if it's SR1, 4.9 units an acre, you know, that is what you get for the conservation, but you don't have those minimum lot size. And it is important to understand that ADUs are allowed in this ordinance, just like they are now in other parts of the city, assuming that they are workforce housing units, and then also workforce housing units themselves. Both ADUs and the workforce housing units themselves don't count towards net density on the site. So it's a way to encourage some affordable units in the midst of these other standard market rate developments. We have the pre-application site review before the TRC submission. So that's a new step in the process, but it lets designers and engineers really get together and discover and learn what is best way to utilize the site itself before you even get deeper into that TRC process. And the upfront information, all conservation trees, wetlands, OCRM critical areas, man-made and natural water bodies, water courses, all that have to be looked at in advance before you get your full TRC review. This is very important to follow along with the Dutch Dialogue's recommendations that talk about water being first, understanding where the water is, getting limited impervious surface. By virtue of the lots not having a minimum lot size, you get smaller driveways, you get more compact areas that have that impervious surface. You get preservation of existing wetlands. We also have to have in this ordinance a 30-foot wetland buffer. 75% of existing wetlands can count towards required open space, because that incentivizes leaving wetlands undisturbed. And I know that's been something that a number of folks have talked about, but our stormwater folks really feel that that is something that will help encourage leaving wetlands undisturbed, that if they got a lower percentage of that, there might be more pressure to get that half acre of wetlands filled. And I don't know how much you all understand in this criteria, but typically getting about a half acre or less of wetlands filled is what's called a nationwide permit. And those are very often easily granted. Now, if you're going more than a half acre of wetlands, then it's more complicated, but we don't want to even see those necessarily have to happen. We'd like to have ways for people to be encouraged to preserve all their existing wetlands, and that's one of the reasons for that high percentage there. We feel like green infrastructure and pre-development hydrology is very important, and understanding the green infrastructure and pre-development hydrology, and this ordinance goes a long way towards those criteria. Just going to zip through here. It incentivizes the creation of workforce housing because it doesn't count towards your net density, and it allows for single family attached only if 20% of it includes workforce housing. The ADUs, as I've already mentioned, it's important to understand when you're looking at the affordable housing aspects of this ordinance that as we roll into our comprehensive plan, you all have heard this before, but I'll mention it again, 42% of the city of Charleston residents are cost burden. In other words, that means that they're having to spend more than 30%, which is the recommended level of expenditures in an average family's budget. They're having to spend more than 30% of that budget on housing. So we've got this real strong situation here where we've got to provide more affordable housing options. And our studies for the comprehensive plan show that to eliminate these cost burden situations in the city, we'd have to have at least 16,000 units built over the next 10 years. Surely a tall order, but developments like these conservation developments with the incentives there are for affordable housing can help meet that goal. This is the different areas of the city and the different number of units that are needed to meet that cost affordability goal. And you can see it's widespread, it's throughout the city. It's less populated areas like Cainhoy still have units that are needed. And then of course, West Ashley leads the city as the most populous area of the city in needing 6,000 units over the next 10 years. It's going to be a hard goal to meet, but we want to do everything we can with our zoning to help try to meet that. So here we have the actual ordinance itself, and we can certainly go through kind of line by line. I think you all got these in advance, so I'm happy to do, particular line questions and all. I'm not going to read through the entire ordinance, but essentially it is using the staff expertise to have the development community bring those concepts to the staff for the initial reviews, even in advance of the TRC process. We've got incredible folks on our staff that know the stormwater situation, that understand the trees, the wetlands, the beautiful aspects of these sites that need to be preserved. And we think we can really get a high quality product. We felt like we were getting a pretty good product with some of the cluster developments, but this is going to be even better one, and it's going to work even better with our stormwater codes that we have in place now. And with that, I'll kind of open it up for questions, or I guess we've got some public comment too.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Chloe, I think we have two people signed up to speak. Councilmember Jackson, is she available?
Yes, Councilmember Jackson, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Council.
I really appreciate the opportunity to support this ordinance in its current form. I do think that the council has some work to do after you all would potentially recommend it to our purview for second public hearing and second and third reading. We've heard some really good comments from organizations like the Coastal Conservation League, who study all of these, these zonings and the principles behind them. But overall, this is head and shoulders over the cluster ordinance that I was the sponsor of sunsetting a few months ago. So I appreciate greatly your attention to that request. and the reasons that now the city staff is back to you with this conservation ordinance. We know that we've got land that is very complicated to develop, to say the least, and we have not yet taken delivery of the city plan that takes into consideration the analysis that's done by the Wagner and Ball consultants who did our Dutch dialogues. So I think we've got, this is an ordinance that will be exemplary for how we're paying attention to land use and the conditions that we have remaining to approve for any sort of housing density. So I would encourage you to vote yes on this ordinance. And we look forward to entertaining your recommendation. And Mr. Chairman, if I could, can I be so bold as to ask that I could also support the next ordinance that you all are going to consider, the workforce?
Sure, for the sake of time, you're not going to be able to be with us. You go ahead and
I'm
support that as
officially
well.
on vacation. I'm celebrating with my husband our completion of vaccines, and we're in a lovely place, and we're supposed to be going out to dinner. So I would appreciate to support the MU workforce housing amendment, incorporating the change to the fee in lieu. Again, I know that we've heard from very vigilant organizations who have studied all of the iterations of how we do workforce housing best in the city. And I personally intend to pay attention to their recommendations and hope to add in additional amendments, especially for the included units that would retain them for in a permanent mode as opposed to 25 years. But in the meantime, we hope that you will recommend this back to the council. I really appreciate the opportunity to support both ordinances in front of you tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Jackson, and you stay healthy, and glad you got your vaccines, and we always appreciate your taking time to be with us. It shows a lot for the interest of City Council to be with our meetings, and thank you. I think we have Ms. Drolet to speak also in favor. Is that correct, Chloe?
That's correct.
We'll go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cashin Drolet, Historic Charleston Foundation. The foundation is supportive of the Conservation Development Ordinance before you this evening, which will afford further protection of wetlands, trees, historic structures, and cultural resources in suburban areas of the city. The ordinance is consistent with the recommendations made in the Dutch Dialogues Charleston final report, as it will allow for prioritization of development on high ground, protect natural and cultural assets, and avoid placement of future residents in risky flood-prone areas. Respectfully, the foundation encourages commissioners to recommend approval of the ordinance this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Drolet, and I think that's everyone. Chloe, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, that signed up to speak, and no written comments that we have. So that'll close the public aspect to this, and then ask any commission members if they have questions, comments, or any motions.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move for approval.
And
Thank you, Mr. Lassane. You want to go ahead, Harry? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just going to say, both this ordinance amendment that we're looking at now and the one we're about to look at reflect what a good city ought to be doing, and that is policy, which both the cluster ordinance and the changes to the fee in lieu ordinance. And as we learn how to make things better, we change them and we make them better, and that's what's being done here with the cluster ordinance, conservation development ordinance, no minimum lot size, all the things that Christopher talked about. I just think it's the way a good city operates. So I will support this.
Thank you. And I appreciate that motion. Ms. Jacobs, you had your hand up. You go ahead.
I think Mrs. Limpis has had her hand up before me.
Well, I recognize you, so you go ahead. Sunday will wait a
Okay.
minute. I know that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will second Mr. Lassane's motion, and I just want to thank staff profusely for their hard work to get this, very elegant ordinance back to us so swiftly and incorporating so many things that have been learned over the last couple of years working with the Dutch dialogue people and stuff like that. I was very heartened to see that workforce housing within this ordinance will be maintained in perpetuity. I just have one question as to why we chose the minimum acreage of 10. If I could I'd just like a clarification.
So that was really in our previous ordinance, the cluster ordinance, we had a 5 acre minimum. And when we as a staff reviewed the cluster ordinance and looked at them around the city, we did a field trip to them around the city over a year ago. The feeling was we weren't getting as good a product from the smaller ones. It was small. It was more difficult to get the cohesive green spaces that really help, preserve the trees, the wetlands, all that with the smaller sizes. So we felt like the 10 was better. It could be that there's a happy medium somewhere between 5 and 10, but we felt like the 5 was just too small. And so we went with the 10 to start.
Thank you. I just wanted a clarification. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Ms. Lampesis, you go ahead.
First of all, I'd like to thank staff for getting back to us so quickly on this conservation ordinance, because after the disappointing vote from council overriding what the Planning Commission had recommended on the cluster, and it was then zoned to the conservation, I was really glad to see something come before us, and you put a lot of work in this. It was a little hard to understand or to explain, and I think it's just going to take time to convey what qualities are in this that somebody can come to you and actually know ahead of time what they can anticipate while they're looking at a piece of property. And from a development standpoint, it's a little vague, in my opinion, which is both good and bad. But I think that we may have to, take this and may have to adjust it a little bit as we take the first one on. So I will move, obviously, to vote for this. I have to tell you that I'm still disappointed about the cluster. And but I hope this makes this better so that we don't have any issues like we did in one of the neighborhoods. So I will vote for the ordinance.
Thank you, Ms. Lampesis. Good comments. Any other commission members want to speak on this or questions? If not, we have a motion by Mr. Lassane, I think. Did I get it right? Yeah, and a second by Ms. Lampesis. I'm testing my memory. Ms. Jacobs, okay. To support, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Bailey?
I in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Bryant Jenkins?
I in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Harrison?
I in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Jacobs?
I in favor.
Thanks. Ms. Johnson?
I in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Lampesis?
I in favor.
Great. Mr. Lassane?
I in favor.
Thank you. Mr. Flue?
I in favor.
Thank you, sir. And I'm in favor as well. So that's 9 in support and none opposing. The second ordinance amendment is number 2 to amend Chapter 15, Workforce Housing District and Opportunity Zones of Article 2, Land Use Regulations of Chapter 54 of the Code of the City of Charleston, South Carolina zoning ordinance to provide for an increased fee in lieu of development required workforce housing units on site. Mr. Morgan?
Okay, and I am gonna turn to, I think Ms. Johnson is joining us, or Mr. McQueenie. Maybe it's Mr. McQueenie. Mr. Batchelder is out ill today and so could not be with us. And so Ms. Johnson or Mr. McQueen were going to help us a little bit with giving you all an explanation on this ordinance. I'm seeing Mr. McQueenie here on our list. Is he available? Oh, there we go. Here we go, Mr. McQueenie.
Oh, yep. And Ms. Johnson's probably better to replace Mr. Batchelder. He may be irreplaceable. I've known him a long time. I know everyone else has too. I just wanted to go through, I did have some quick changes that were made by City Council on first reading. And Christopher, if I'm allowed to share my screen, that would be great.
I share. There we
They're
go.
very, I think they're minor. A couple of them are just scrivener's errors on my part, not anything major. I'm getting my PDF open here. All right. PDF. And there we go. All right. Can everyone see a PDF document in front of you? And the first change, and this was not something that was changed by council. Council actually changed the definition of second generation properties. Let me explain this whole issue to you all. So the ordinance has changed twice, which you all probably know better than I do, but I'm still going to explain it. On January 10th, 2017, it changed. I think that was when so it was formerly a 15% workforce housing requirement and a $3.40 multiplier. When that was changed to what I call second generation properties, the multiplier went up to, I think it's $5.10 now, and it's a 20% workforce housing requirement. Because this is incentive-based zoning and it's voluntary, a voluntary rezoning on everyone's part. I think the decision was made the first time we changed it to not penalize anybody who had already sought workforce housing zoning. So the first generation properties are those that were rezoned to workforce housing prior to that $5.10 raise and the 20% raise. And they still enjoy the setup that they had when they rezoned. Now we have second generation properties, assuming this gets adopted. So I've defined that to include not first generation properties, but everything else that's been rezoned. There was an ambiguity in the one that I kind of showed to council last time. I had defined second generation properties that rezoning had to occur before March 9th, 2021. But in the effective date section, I put for which an application has been submitted prior to March 9th, 2021. Yours says February 25th because that's when the Community Development Committee considered it, but they didn't have the actual ordinance in front of them. So I didn't want that to be the date because no one had seen it by that date. First time people really saw it in a public hearing was March 9th. Planning has sort of drilled down into how many people this ambiguity would affect. And I think there's two. One is a small minority owned property that wants to provide, I think, 3 on-site workforce housing units that is already up for second reading before council on March 23rd. And then the second is Courier Square, which you all addressed earlier. I think they've also agreed to do on-site housing. I was sitting through when you read into the record what they had planned to do as far as that's concerned. Based on that, I'm not as concerned about the ambiguity. I wrote this so that it says if an application is filed before March 9th, but it's not rezoned, then the new ordinance, the old ordinance would apply. Otherwise, the new ordinance apply. Do you have any questions on that before I move on? Because that's a lot of language. Do a lot at you. But So my recommendation would be to include that, and I've spoken to multiple people today about these dates. I did not lie to anybody, but I represented that I would recommend the opposite of this before planning drilled down into it. So I apologize to anyone who got the wrong impression earlier today. I have flip-flopped, but it was really based on hard data that, thanks to Christopher, we got this afternoon. So my recommendation would be to recommend to council that it be applications pending on March 9th. And then council could decide from there. The second change that council did consider is this is just a scrivener's error, that in the definition of gross square footage, that you can start out with a grocery store or pharmacy, but if you change, you can pay a fee per unit, based on the change and how long the grocery store or pharmacy was in effect. That did not read properly. I just didn't draft it, change the language properly from the previous ordinance, and I've done that here. City Council, again, has seen that and gave first reading to that language, but I did not see it reflected in your version of the ordinance. Things that are in blue are things that I've changed since City Council has seen this, and there should only be two things. The next change that I made, and I would recommend, this was a comment we received this afternoon through planning from Historic Charleston Foundation, I believe it was, that the providing non-residential uses on the ground floor provision should really only apply if there's less than 5. If there's one workforce housing unit required on the property, you can provide 50% of your ground floor or 1,500 square feet, the greater, as non-residential uses instead of providing workforce housing unit. That has just been redrafted to refer to the section, only the section that requires one workforce housing unit. So that only applies if there's one workforce housing unit now. As previously drafted and is considered by City Council, I don't think I should have drafted it that way, but it would have included all developments. So you could replace 50 workforce housing units with this, and that was not the intent. That was my error. The next change I had is you can see we have this tiered structure, and I referred to tier quarter units instead of 4-tier units, but the $15 multiplier applies to 4th-tier units. I know Gianna has went through this during the special meeting, and I'm happy to answer specific questions about that if anybody does after I go through all this. The next change is to ensure that first generation properties still enjoy the ability to convert. If they have a workforce housing unit that they've been renting for a period of time and they wanted to pay a fee in lieu, they could basically pay a prorated fee in lieu after the second or the first revision passed. And Councilmember Gregory actually caught that before the City Council meeting, and I made that change to ensure that those first generation properties are treated the same as they were before. So City Council did approve that red line change. I called in front of City Council, I call this a big little mistake. Section 3, I referenced that 54-299-2 should be deleted and replaced. It should be 5. 2 is basically the main body of the ordinance. We don't want that replaced. The context is clear of which one's being replaced, but I caught that and wanted to change it. The other 2 are, again, relatively small changes. The Section 5, the effective date of the ordinance will apply to rezoning application which is received by the city on or after, any applications received on or after March 9th, 2021, the new ordinance provisions will apply. So I say pending ordinance doctrine, it's not really, there's no vested right to rezone, but it's essentially the same thing. The new ordinance applies to anything from first reading at council here on out, unless for whatever reason, City Council throws out this ordinance. I tend to be a man of many words, so I apologize for throwing all that at you. I'm happy to answer any questions about the substance or structure, but I did want to go over those changes just to make them clear for the record.
Thank you, Mr. McQueen.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Morgan, anything else? Anything else from staff?
Does Ms. Johnson want to say anything about the ordinance?
Chris, thank you. I wanted, for the benefit of the commission, to have Matt just display very quickly the chart that breaks down the fee structure so that the planning commission could have a better sense of what that looks like and what it means. Again, our goal is to incentivize greater housing on these developments. And so the fee is structured in that way. And so if Matt, I see you are moving quickly, thank you. He's gonna take us through just an explanation so that folks can get a sense of what that looks like. Thank you.
Sure. So just as a refresher, and Chip mentioned this earlier, developers voluntarily opt into the MU zoning, and the current requirement is to build either 20% of the affordable units on site or to pay a fee in lieu alternative, which is currently set at $5.10. That applies to the entire gross square footage of the development. And what we're proposing is a tiered fee structure that escalates at each tier. And the goal here is to encourage that at least some of the affordable units are going to be included on site. So you can see the structure here that's explained in the ordinance, but at the first tier, the fee amount is $7.50 per gross square foot. That applies to the first quarter of the gross square footage of the development. It then increases to $10 per gross square foot, applying to the second gross square footage, second 25% of the gross square footage of the development, and so on to the third and fourth tiers at $12.50 per gross square foot and $15 per gross square foot. And to illustrate that change, just as an example, so if you had a development seeking rezoning into the MU zoning, say their gross square footage is 100,000 gross square feet, they're planning to do 100 units on the site, the requirement would be that 20% of those units would be workforce housing units, or 20 units. So under the current structure, that $5.10 per gross square foot gets applied to the entire 100,000 gross square feet of the development. So they can either choose to build the units themselves, to build the 20 units, or they can pay the fee, $5.10 times 100,000, for a total fee amount on the site of $510,000. Under the proposed structure with the tiered fee structure, the scenario is just a little bit different. So again, they can decide to build the units themselves, to build the 20 units, or if they decide to pay the fee, then you're looking at each of these individual tiers. So if you go through each tier at tier 1, to offset 5 units, they would be paying $7.50 times a quarter of the gross square footage of the development to get your total fee amount on that first tier, $187,000. In the second tier, it increases to $10, covers the next 25,000 gross square feet. You're offsetting an additional 5 units. And that continues for tiers 3 and 4. So hopefully that illustrates the change that's being made under the proposed ordinance. And if there's any questions, be happy to take those.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, anything else?
No, sir, I just wanted to thank Matt for that. I'm echoing, I apologize for that illustration. And hopefully that clearly shows the commission what I referred to earlier. If developers choose to, at this point with the new ordinance, build fewer units, the fee goes up. The goal would be, again, to increase the number of units or at least maintain a number of units on site to help with facilitating affordable housing. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson, and thanks, Mr. McQueenie, for your all's information. I think, Chloe, we heard from Councilmember Jackson on this. Is Ms. Drolet with us?
Yes.
Ms. Drolet, you go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cashin Drolet, Historic Charleston Foundation. As has been said many times this evening, affordable housing is one of Charleston's greatest challenges and has approached a crisis level. Through our work with the Charleston Redevelopment Corporation and the Palmetto Community Land Trust, HCF is a committed partner of the city in addressing this crisis. Since it was created, MUWH zoning has been an important tool in the city's tool belt. However, as Ms. Johnson has demonstrated in her presentations this evening, since the MUWH zoning has not actually produced dedicated units in these new housing developments, the ordinance really has not the intent of the ordinance has not been met, and HCF feels strongly that it's time to revisit the ordinance and is supportive of a fee increase, particularly in light of the findings by community data platforms for the comprehensive plan, highlighting the city's dire housing needs, not only for workforce, but across the AMI spectrum. The ordinance before you this evening offers a creative approach, and HCF very much would like to see it move forward. However, it's critical that we get this right, and there's some questions and concerns we believe should be addressed. This tiered structure and hybrid approach is creative, but a little complicated. How will the city manage and implement this? The workforce housing units will revert to market rate after 25 years. This affordability period possibly should be extended in order to have a meaningful impact. Condo regime, parking, and other similar fees can be expensive and could render workforce housing units unaffordable for income qualified individuals. The ordinance should address this. Accommodations users pay the accommodations uses pay the current fee in lieu of $5.10 a square foot. Should that fee be tied to this increase? At a minimum, it should be linked to inflation as this ordinance proposes. And lastly, I'd like to thank Mr. McQueenie and Mr. Morgan for taking a look at that legal language on the top of page 3 of the ordinance. I appreciate you doing so. As I mentioned previously, housing is a critical issue for the city and of utmost importance to HCF, and we want to put all considerations on the table to ensure that we get a great and workable ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Do we have Mr. Turner with us? you got Mr. Turner on the line? Great. You go ahead, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to echo those comments. We also want to commend Ms. Johnson for her leadership on making improvements to the ordinance. Clearly, this is one of the city's biggest and most impactful tools for addressing the housing affordability gap. But we have some real concern that the return on investment for this fee in lieu provision has been lacking. We noted city data showing that but for the in lieu of provision, we would have 381 workforce housing units. And instead, the city was only able to provide 28.3 units, given that it incurs much higher transaction costs for purchasing land and developing housing. So in light of this, private sector leadership is critical to ensure economic diversity in newer, denser buildings. And we clearly need model projects in the short term to address this housing affordability gap. And also to provide that providing a mix of market rate and affordable units doesn't detract from, but rather enhances the brand of a development. In terms of the details of the draft ordinance, there's a couple provisions I wanted to draw some attention to. The community needs greater assurance that the covenant terms, in terms of the 25-year provision, are being effectively enforced and that the right applicants are getting placed in workforce housing that is being developed. And so one option would be placing the city in a stronger role as lessee of these units and encourage other creative approaches to make sure that we're actually getting people we want in those buildings, teachers, firefighters, policemen, etc. The second relates to the term of the covenants, the 25 years. We would, of course, like to see that provision extended. But in lieu, if that can't happen, the commission could urge for a creative approach for developers like the Courier Square, who spoke earlier, who appear to be electing to go above and beyond in terms of create permanent affordability. And we'd encourage the commission to look at how to provide and provide benefits for, incentivize more developers like that who want to do the right thing and make affordable housing permanent, which it should be. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. I think, Chloe, there's 2 written comments in favor and then one just general comment. Would you read those into the record?
Yes. Okay. Okay, for the first comment in favor is from Paula Brady, 12 George Street. Paula says to raise the fee to the highest square foot level on developers. They have and will continue paying a low fee because developers make more money in selling non-affordable housing units. Charleston Historic Foundation is correct. Raise the fee developers will pay who continue to select the short-term problematic option. Then from Ledley Bell, 498 Albemarle Road, Unit 101. It needs to be tightened in every way, make it much more costly, raise fees and base it on inflation, and make it long-term. Period of affordability should be indefinite. And then a comment from Cindy Wofford, 8C Elliott Street, to mandate workforce units versus the fee in lieu option.
Is there another general comment, or did you took care of all of them?
That's all of them.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Jacobs, let's do this. Let me close the public aspect out. But I would ask Ms. Johnson if she'd like to, or Mr. McQueenie, address any of the things that were brought up by any of the people that spoke. Ms. Johnson, would you like to address anything? I guess the main comment was about the number of years and things like that.
Yes, sir. We would want to evaluate that further. Simply, this ordinance, our goal was to achieve a balance, understanding that our ultimate goal is to get more affordable housing units. So as we look at perpetuity or extending that from 25 to 30 years, we would want time to evaluate that further. I would just say that. And if I could step back even further, some of the comments that came from the public, I love those. I'm a fan of inclusionary zoning, so one day we may be talking about that very soon, but that's another topic for another day. I wanted to also make you aware that there is an inflationary structure in this ordinance. As I indicated to you earlier in my report, we did not do that the first time. We were not going to leave that out this time. So it is tied to the consumer price index. So that is there. Any developers that opt into the MU2 workforce housing has to enter into a memorandum of understanding. Their clients are evaluated on an annual basis. And when I say their clients, the persons that end up renting units or homes from these developments are evaluated by the housing development officer who sits as part of the staff of housing and community development to make certain that they qualify for those units and that they are in fact a part of that workforce income category. So I think those were some of the concerns that were mentioned. We are looking and evaluating, would need to stare at that perpetuity issue and that longer term affordability area, unless the commission has some specific recommendations it would have us consider this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. That'll close the public aspect of this out. Ms. Jacobs, you had your hand up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If Mr. McQueenie is available, if he could just explain to me the term pending ordinance doctrine, please.
Yeah, so the pending ordinance doctrine applies, it's a rule of the common law, and the idea is that if you have, so if, when city council, the rule is that when city council advertises its intent to change an ordinance, that the pending ordinance doctrine applies to prevent applications that contradict the pending and later enacted ordinance. So the idea is to stop people, you know, classic example would be you're going to change everything, you know, a district from mostly commercial to mostly residential back when everybody wanted, back when you had Euclidean zoning and commercial was favored and over residential clearly. People would rush to get plans submitted, complete applications submitted to get a vested right to their commercial zoning as a non-conforming use. And the pending ordinance doctrine was something created by the courts really to stop that from happening. So I always say it prevents a run to the zoning administrator to try to get around the new regulations. So here, what you're doing with the pending ordinance is ensuring that the new regulations apply to any applications, depending on what you recommend and city council ultimately adopts, any applications that were pending either that were submitted before March 9th or any rezonings that finally occurred to be March 9th. And it'd really be up to city council to resolve that issue ultimately.
Thank you. I just need.
Yes,
Thank you,
ma'am.
Ms. McQueenie. Donna, do you have anything else?
Yes, I just heard Ms. Johnson suggest that they wanted to spend a little time with this ordinance evaluating the longevity, because I wanted to see how Planning Commission felt like recommending longer times, but I'm kind of getting the impression that Ms. Johnson's office would like to get this ordinance in place and then evaluate that. And did I understand her correctly on that? Is she still available?
You did. I am. I would love us to move forward and then we evaluate that as necessary. Again, wanting to achieve a balance, we need to look at whether perpetuity works in this instance. I think I heard that from our partners at Historic Charleston Foundation. But I think, again, what we presented to you tonight is what we believe is best at the time, but we always want to do the very best in every situation. So if we need to revisit that affordability period within the structure, we will do that. Thank you.
Thank you, because
Ms.
what I was
McQueenie,
noticing.
do you want to add something in there? Ms. McQueenie, do you want to add something?
I just did want to mention, and I understanding John's concern, the pending ordinance doctrine does not apply to grant rights that you would otherwise not get. So it acts to limit, it does not act to grant. So as zoning has gotten more and more complicated, you have a zoning ordinance like this where there's, you know, there is some taking away of rights, but there's also arguably some granting. There's really no ability for people to take advantage of this ordinance while it's pending. It just prevents people from using the old ordinance while it's pending. That's the time crunch.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McQueenie. Donna, do you have anything else?
Well, I just wanted to add that during all the presentation that we got before Planning Commission and this evening is that it seems that Ms. Johnson's office is aggressively evaluating this ordinance, you know, like every 2 years. It seemed like you were adding things, changing things. And even with our city plan, affordable housing focus, we may get this and evaluate this pretty quickly. So I just wanted to positively affirm that they are doing that and appreciate her comments because it helps me understand what to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Mr. Bailey?
I don't want to cut off anyone else, but I was going to make a motion to approve. You know, I believe that we got data showing that there are some modifications to the existing ordinance that were needed, and so those are being proposed, and additional data comes forward saying that more changes are needed, we can do that, but I move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. And good comments as well. Any other questions, comments, or a second to the motion?
I will second the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Great, Mr. Lassane seconds the motion. We have a motion by Mr. Bailey, a second by Mr. Lassane. If there's no other comments, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Bailey?
I in favor.
Thank you, Ms. Bryant Jenkins.
In favor?
Thank you. Ms. Harrison? Ms. Harrison with us? No? Ms. Jacobs?
I in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson?
I in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Lemphasis?
I in favor.
Great. Mr. Lassane?
Aye, in favor.
Thanks. Mr. Flug?
I'm in favor.
Great, and I'm in favor as well. You know, I think that I heard that Ms. Harrison may have to recluse herself on this, and that may be the case is why she's not on here. So we'll have to check on that, but that being the case, there's 8 in favor and none opposed. So this zoning amendment passes. The next item on the agenda is almost there. Got too many papers here. Here we go. The subdivision. Number 1, Oakville Plantation, American Road, Oakville Plantation Road, American Star, Johns Island, PMS number 317-000-000-11055 and 089, approximately 201.6 acres, 205 lots. Request 1-year extension of subdivision concept plan approval, zone rural, residential, RR1, and light industrial, L1. Mr. Morgan, who's going to be speaking on this?
I think Ms. Hart can give you a little bit of background on what was part of the concept plan.
Okay.
And then Mr. Doman, who
And I think we're,
will be representing the city
and I think,
on this, will also be able to give you some advice.
Good evening. This one is an extension of a concept plan approval. We saw this last year. It was approved, the original concept plan was approved by the Planning Commission on April 18th of 2018. On June 17th of last year, it was approved for a 1-year extension until April 18th of 2021. And now they are seeking their second 1-year extension. The concept plan was approved with certain conditions, and some of them was the re-verification of the OCRM critical line, and that they had to work with transportation improvements to include resurfacing of impacted sections of Burden Creek Road and other improvements identified in the traffic impact study for this project after consultation with Charleston County and South Carolina DOT. This approval is follow the section 54-962 of the City of Charleston zoning ordinance. It's shown on the screen if Christopher goes back to that, or Chloe. Since this is a extension of a concept plan approval, the city recommends approval.
make sure I'm unmuted now. Thank you, Ms. Hart. And we have some comments, I believe. Ms. Chloe, would you go ahead? I think, well, I'm sorry. The applicant, Mr. Richardson or Mr. Gaskins, would they like to be heard?
Yes,
Chloe?
they're both entering as panelists now.
All right, thank you. Mr. Richardson, Mr. Gaskins, whenever you're ready.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commission. Thank you very much for hearing us tonight. My name is Todd Richardson. I'm the landscape architect of record for the project. Presenting along to me with me tonight will be Brandon Gaskins, legal representation for the project. We are seeking our second of 5 available 1-year extensions on the concept plan approval. And we accept the continued conditions given by staff for their recommended approval. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Thank you. Did Mr. Gaskins want to say anything, or?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I will be brief. I know it's been a long meeting. Briefly, just want to state that it is our position that under the applicable law, the applicant is legally entitled to a one-year extension of the vested right unless there has been any amendment to the zoning code that would preclude any aspect of the approved plan. As you recall, last year in June, when we held this meeting, that was the position that we took, and ultimately the Planning Commission agreed with that. Since that time, there has been no amendment that would preclude approval of the plan. So we would ask that you grant this extension, and I'm also happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, sir. Chloe, we have, Chloe, I believe we have two people in opposition. Since there's no one in favor, why don't we hear, if you have those folks available, why don't you put one of them on?
Jason Crowley.
Mr. Crowley, you go ahead.
Very much. My name is Jason Crowley, Director of Communities and Transportation for the Coastal Conservation League. Well, as mentioned, this is typically a rubber stamp approval of the concept plan approval that was issued in 2018. I wanted to make sure that it was clear that this applicant has submitted an entirely different concept plan approval to TRC. And so it begs a legal question of what happens when you have two approved concept plan approvals for one site. They're essentially double dipping. And since they have not been working on this concept plan approval over this last year, they've been working on an entirely new one. We urge this planning commission to deny this extension and instruct the applicant to focus on the latest concept plan approval that they have submitted to TRC. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Crowley. And I believe there's Mr. Zlogar. Is there just a letter from him, Chloe? Is that correct?
No, Mr. Slogar is here to speak, but also there's a letter in the package for the record.
Okay. So go ahead and put him on. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. You go ahead, sir. Thank you.
This is John Zlogar. I'm with the Johns Island Task Force here on Johns Island. As Mr. Crowley mentioned, normally this extension would be a formality, but nothing really seems to be normal with this subdivision. Whether it's the low elevation of the land or the fact that they're trying to do single family residential housing in a fire district, there always seems to be something unique. And now we have a request for an extension for a concept plan for the very same parcels that are going through the TRC process for a different subdivision. You have the very real possibility that there will be two approved concept plans for the very same parcels. It's time to address this issue and deny this extension request. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I don't think there's anyone else signed up to speak on this. Ms. Harp or Christopher or whomever, would they like to address a couple of the questions that were brought up by the people in opposition?
Ms. Harp, did you want to work on those or?
Which question about the two concept plans? Is that what the main question? Would that be the question?
Yes, I'm not. Yes, ma'am. Okay. That's the only question I had. I'm sure that it wouldn't come to us if it wasn't prepared or if it wasn't legal to come to us yet. So I'm assuming that. But if you'll just address that, I appreciate it.
Okay, so the River Run, which is the other concept plan, has been to TRC one time and it has not received approval. So there is no concept plan approval for that subdivision. So there is no, the only concept plan that is in effect right now is the American Star, which is the one that you have in front of you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So I think that answers that. Thank you. Did you have anything else you want to say, Ms. Harp, or is that it?
That's it.
Nope. Thank
Unless you have any other questions.
Thank you. All right, that closes the public aspect of this. We'd ask any commission members, questions, comments, or motion.
Mr. Chairman,
everybody, Go ahead, Mr. Lefane.
I would like to move for approval based on the fact that we've had a similar situation a number of times over the past couple of years. So I'm comfortable with the decision we made a year ago on this, and for that reason, I'm comfortable with it. So I will move for approval. If there are other members of the commission who would like to get advice from our legal counsel, we're open to that, but I'm comfortable with moving forward, so I will move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Lefane.
I would like,
Go ahead.
I would like
Other
to
comments,
second,
questions, or?
Charlie, I'd like to second,
Ms. Lampus?
I'd like to second Mr. Lasane's motion. They have the right for a 1-year extension 5 times, and we can beat it to death, but that's what they have the right for. And we need to just stop discussing it and move it and approve it.
Thank you, Ms. Lampus. Any other questions, comments? We have a motion and a second. If there's not, we'll go ahead and do a roll call vote. I agree with you. You know, we're not here to talk about the subdivision. We're here to talk about their extension. That's the only thing we're here to talk about, and they do have that right. So I'm going to do a roll call vote. Mr. Bailey?
I would like to abstain.
Okay. Ms. Bryant Jenkins?
I in favor on the extension.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Harrison?
I in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Jacobs?
I'm going to follow Mr. Bailey and abstain.
Okay. Ms. Johnson?
I'm going to vote in favor. Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Lampasas?
I in favor of the extension.
Thanks. Mr. Lassane?
I in favor.
Great. Mr. Flug?
I in favor.
Great. Thank you. And I'm in favor as well. So that's, I think 7 in favor and 2 that abstain. So that will pass that extension. The last item on our agenda is zonings. 2138 Golfview Drive, Riverland, Golfview, James Island, TMS number 343060013, approximately 0.22 acres. Request zoning of single family or SR1. It was zoned R4 in Charleston County. Mr. Morgan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is a recent annexation. It's almost a 1/4 acre. It would come in the city as SR1, which is the closest compatible district to R4. It is in our suburban recommended zoning or recommended land use recommendations. And you can see it's a single family house as per the image there.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Morgan. And I don't think anyone has signed up to speak on this. Is that correct, Chloe? Is the applicant here? I don't think they're even here with us, are they?
No, they're not.
Great. So that'll close the public aspect of this. Is there a motion, comments, questions?
I move for approval.
Great.
I
Is that Mr.
second.
Bailey move for approval, and who seconds?
Jenkins.
Mr. Lassane? I don't know. Oh, Ms. Bryant Jenkins, thank you. So Mr. Bailey moves for approval, Ms. Bryant Jenkins seconds. We'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Bailey?
I in favor.
Great. Ms. Jenkins?
In favor.
Thank you. Ms. Harrison?
I in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Jacobs?
I in favor.
Thanks. Ms. Johnson?
I in favor.
Great. Ms. Lampasas?
I in favor.
Thanks. Mr. Lassane?
I in favor.
Thanks. Mr. Flug?
I in favor.
Great, and I'm in favor as well, so that's 9 in favor and none opposed. The last item on the agenda, which was at the beginning, is minutes. I think they were sent out. Has anyone had any questions or comments, or can we get an approval of the minutes that were sent out to the commission members?
I'll move for approval, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Jacobs moves for approval. I'm good because if Ms. Jacobs moves for approval, I know they're right, okay? Ms. Jacobs moves for
That was my
approval.
thought, Mr. Chairman.
Is there-
I will second the motion.
Thank you. And if Mr. Lassane seconds, I know they're right. There's no question. Can we do a roll call vote on that? Unless there's any other comments or questions. Mr. Bailey?
I in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Jenkins?
I in
Mr.
favor.
Bryant Jenkins, I'm sorry. Thank you. Ms. Harrison?
I in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Jacobs?
I in favor.
Ms. Johnson?
I in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Lampasas?
I in favor.
Great. Mr. Lassane?
I in favor.
Thanks. Mr. Flug?
I in favor.
Great, and I'm in favor as well. So that's 9 in favor, none opposed. I think that concludes our agenda. I appreciate everyone's time and patience tonight. It was a long meeting. I guess we started at 4:30. We've almost been here 4 hours, so that's great. I'm thinking about, Mr. Bailey, I'm thinking about that chubby fish now, so.
You promised me a dinner,
I'm
Charlie.
curious. No, we'll have to go. I
We'll
want
go.
a little Leon's and the chubby fish. Any restaurant I heard now, I'm hungry for, you know? All right, thank everybody for your work, and I appreciate y'all. Have a good evening.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.